regulation. This is a work session today. Can we take a roll?
Certainly. Larry Larson,
Here.
Don DeZellem,
Here.
Ken Hartsfield. Ooh, absent. Okay. Don Hoyne.
Here.
Ken Kennedy.
Here.
And Jared Newcomb is also absent. Also in attendance, we have Councilmember Nakai, myself, Dave Burgess, and then Jennifer Gardner is online with us.
And I'm here too.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I forgot about you. Thank you, Chair Lee Brown.
Stands on one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, we have a work session further on our code review project. And I guess that means we look to our planning director.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Very glad to have you. This evening, there's a couple different topics we need to cover. The first is the section of regulations that would address temporary use permits. We were able to get that uploaded into Conveo on Monday, so you could put any placeholders in there so we can address those comments. I'm sure you noticed that the vast majority of that language is what's already in our existing regulations. It was really just restructured into the format that we are now using for all our various application types. And then the next thing that we want to talk about relates to residential uses, both in the use table and our associated definitions. We already talked about all of that well over a year ago, and I feel really, really horrible that I'm asking you to retread over that same ground. But as we started to look at how do you incorporate condominium and townhome plats, the terminology that we have now is not great. And then our attempt to refine that about a year ago really didn't help. So I just decided it's like, no, we need to revisit this holistically and have for you a discussion where we'll start with the revised use table, that section, to talk about how the words are now in that use table versus the terminology that we are now suggesting. And then we can look at the definitions associated with those various terms. So that's the plan for this evening. Questions, concerns?
Was there some state laws that were passed that affect those definitions a little bit?
The biggest one relates to definition of family. That, you know, right now we definitely have one of those in our code, and it's many communities across the state have attempted to use that as a way to regulate the number of people that can occupy a single dwelling. And the state in its infinite wisdom last year has declared that we can no longer do that. So that's why in those definitions you see where family is now struck out and it says see household. And then there's very different language there in terms of what constitutes a household. So you're not into no more than X number of people unrelated or related by cousins, marriage, blah, blah, blah. So it's
One thing that was missed is we're gonna have to change the name of a couple of our zones.
oh, yeah.
MFS and MFU seem to be ripe for change.
Quite potentially. Yeah, now that you bring that up, but Jen and I can talk about where we go with that, but yeah. But for tonight, I wanted to get through, you know, really where we split the various categories and where those align and how they get reviewed. I also want to note that I was given very excellent advice, I don't know, a year or so ago, that in my tenure as planning director, the friendly advice was do not try to fix a conditional use permit being required for multifamily housing in a multifamily housing zone district. So we hold true to how the regulations are currently worded and where that is a requirement that somebody who wants to do multifamily housing, that conditional use permit is still a requirement. You'll see that when we get to that section of the table. So I just thought I'd note that I heeded the friendly advice.
household,
What's it?
say multi-household?
I'm not ready to go there yet. Let's get through tonight, you know. I'm gonna stumble enough this evening already, as I'm sure Jen will too, in terms of just transitioning from family to household. But we'll all get there as a group, I'm sure. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jen so we can go through the temporary use permit regulation section. Can we hear you, Jen?
Yes, I was trying to share screen and unmute at the same time.
Okay, hang tight, and we're gonna need you to kind of keep talking about nothing because the sound in the room is off.
Okay, I will
Or
talk
not.
about the weather that is very beautiful outside, the sunshine. I don't know what else to talk about. Can you hear me yet?
No,
Probably hear her fine.
the speakers are not working in this front part of the room for her, Dave.
I'll keep talking and then I'll start singing.
Keep on talking.
Keep talking.
So Jen, I don't know if you
Let's see.
heard him or not.
Uh-huh.
He
I could
said
hear.
that he seems to think
It's fine on my speakers.
that. Okay, say something, Jen.
Hello, hello. I'm here, ready for our meeting.
So I mean, it's the same volume on my speakers for her as for you, so it's not on her end, I wouldn't think. Must be not routing to our audio device that goes to the PA. But it's weird that it's just her because Karen's working. Oh, wait, actually, we're talking through these mics, not through the Zoom.
Yeah, and I can hear you guys just fine too, so it must just be the speakers on your end.
Yeah. Nope,
No.
not Jen, everybody else is. But not the Zoom audio.
I'll keep talking until we get it fixed. Oh wait, I'm singing again.
We all listen via Zoom instead of listening.
I like to look at my comments because that's very hard for me to read up there.
Yeah, you can still just listen.
So what's the audio device for your Zoom meeting that she's attending that you're trying to put in the PA? Okay. I mean, we can put her on a mic. Try now, Jen.
Okay. Can you hear me better?
Try it now.
Now you're echoing. But
Turn the other mic off on Zoom.
Yeah, there's other ones in the room that'll pick it up though. Oh.
Try again.
okay, we'll get there sometime tonight.
Turn the mic off on the PA. So whoever has a
Now I can't hear you.
now try it. Can you hear us?
Okay. I can hear you, yes. But it's coming through your Zoom, Ken.
Yeah, I know. Surprisingly, the mics on the laptops pick up a room fairly well,
Okay.
but I don't know if you guys want to try it like this.
I can't hear Karen at all.
He's not talking into the mics and the speakers very well.
Can you hear me now, Jen?
Yes, a little bit. Speak again, Karen. I think this might work.
Well, I can hear it through his computer.
Yeah, where it's coming.
Yeah.
I've got my mic sitting on the speaker so you can hear Jen through the PA, presumably.
That's why he echoes when he talks. You might want to consider it here.
Do it on the phone and then you can.
You're gonna laugh at this, Marley, because if you cell phone, the battery should have been charged earlier, it was not. I have issues in my personal. So I am going to attempt to call you on your personal next to where I sit.
Okay,
So.
Yeah, we'll give you a seat at the table tonight, Jen.
okay, awesome.
We could all just.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm gonna mute my audio again, Dave. House into the Zoom meeting, which is working now because I can hear it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, I'm gonna switch you to my headphones though here.
Actually, this is working pretty good. We don't have an echo.
Okay,
If you can hear us, we can hear you.
I can hear Karen.
all right. Can you hear any of the rest of us?
Yeah, you're a little, that's funny. It's like not coming through the mics anymore, but maybe that's because I'm not connected to the Zoom audio, but I can hear well enough.
Okay, if you need something repeated, just let us know.
Perfect. All right. And I believe you're all seeing my screen with the here now. Hold on. Okay. I'm getting an echo on my end.
You got your phone and your computer audio both on at some point. You need to turn one of them off and just use one of the audios, your phone or your laptop.
Okay,
Okay, we're gonna roll with this. I'm not sure what's happening.
oh crap.
Oh, I know what I need to do. Hold on.
Believe it or not, we did test this earlier this afternoon.
Okay, speak again.
Hello?
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay,
It was defaulting to my actual computer audio and I had to mute that in addition to muting the Zoom, so we're good. Okay,
Can you hear us, Jen?
going through our usual exercise, looking at the temporary use permit section. We'll just start at the top here. We have a couple of comments from Larry, his general comments. And I put number 5 here at the beginning only because it really is kind of the first comment that captures a lot of different things. So the first comment is to retitle and include subsection here instead of purpose being first, having, or maybe purpose needs to still be first, but Larry was recommending a section called a temporary use permit required, and then when it should be required. And Larry, I did want to clarify on this one, because then a little bit later you had a comment about purpose statement, number 3 comment to insert purpose statement, and use number 1. For consistency, I think we need to keep purpose first, but I think a couple of our other sections, we have had an applicability section that comes next, which could address comment number 1, speaking to that it's unlawful for a person to organize, to engage in a temporary use without first obtaining a temporary use permit. Do you think that would address your comment sufficiently and be consistent with other chapters?
Yes.
he said yes.
Okay, perfect. Larry also had a comment about, as written, this chapter is still not clear, and this also says that it wasn't clear in the current code either. That TUPs are reviewed and approved administratively or by council. And that was probably the most challenging portion of getting this reorganized, was how to clarify the nuances of TUPs. So we can talk about that when we get down to that section a little bit more, but I think that's helpful to know that it still feels unclear.
I also want to note that this does tie back into that table of the summary of application types. both of these types of TUPs are going to appear in that table. And if you recall, you go over to the different columns in terms of whether or not it's a hearing or an administrative decision. So like all of our other application types, they work in combination with that summary table. So that gets flagged there.
Okay,
Yeah, I had a comment later on which addressed this specifically. Am I right, the 3 times the city council has to look at this, or if it operates between hours of 9 PM and 7 AM, it'll endure longer than 180 days, or if it's referred by the staff.
Correct.
correct.
So if in fact, when you get down to subsection 5 below, instead of saying there's 2 possibilities, just say there's 3. I know earlier it says the staff may review it, but in the one where it says the final review is by the city council, just put the three provisions rather than just the 2.
Okay, I know what you're after.
I had it commented, but I'm getting ahead, but this is.
Okay. Karen, would you want to repeat that? I think I caught most of that.
Okay, so under procedure, number 4 right now says staff may refer any application to city council for final review and action. And then under number 5, it says city council shall be the final review authority on temporary use applications where, and that's where I would end that sentence, where, A, the proposed temporary use or structure will operate between the hours of 9 PM and 7 AM. B, it will endure for longer than 180 days in a calendar year. Or C, an application had been referred by staff for city council review and decision is what needs to be added. Nobody's correcting me, so I think I got that right.
Okay, so we add a C in this 5.
Yes,
Okay.
Which is the referral.
Right.
with a staff referral to council, yes.
Right.
C5C. Sorry, can you repeat the C, Karen? I was trying to type that up, but
Or either,
you said it so well the first time.
I know, we'll go back to,
Referral by city staff to the city council for.
we'll go back to the recording for that language, because I'm not
Okay,
gonna like
perfect.
redo it.
Right.
I'm gonna stumble.
Like a great plan.
So what needs to be clear is that city administration will be reviewing all temporary use permits except for, like Lee said, the time exceeds 9 PM, it exceeds 180 days in length, and it's referred. So that's how we need to approach this whole section then.
So
It's
just
administrative.
a little nit, it's kind of the way you said it. I understand it. City staff will review all permits. And the subset will be referred to the city council for
Right.
approval.
Correct.
Okay. Did I get that right, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Larry, I'm trying to get through the rest of this, so I think the rest of your comment kind of gets at that as well.
Well, I could go through and give you the rationale real quick.
Just make sure the microphone's real close to you, Larry, please.
Okay. Would you like me to do that?
Go ahead, Larry.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
We've already discussed number 1, general comment. Number 2, general comment is to ensure that this particular section is consistent with the proposed UDC use standards that's already proposed in section 4.05 temporary uses and structures. So just make sure that those two are talking to each other and there's no conflicts.
Okay,
Perfect.
Number 3. Question. how does the existing code and proposed UDC address garage sales and or yard sales? Are they addressed as accessories to dwellings, single-family detached units, or do they require a temporary use permit? That's a question, because I couldn't find that.
So I went back to our use standards section, and garage sales and yard sales are not listed. But you bring up a good point. A lot of times in codes, I will see where a temporary use permit, or a garage sale or yard sale is exempt from receiving a temporary use permit. So is that something we would like to add to this section?
Well, I was hoping that you would say it's accessory to a single-family home. And the reason I said that is because I think we shouldn't try to discourage garage sales. All we should try to do is regulate them for they're not a permanent garage sale.
Yeah, your existing language actually does in your temporary use section where it, let's see, I'm not sure where I'm at, 1806, 562.1. It's a definition of temporary use. And it does say temporary use does not include street musicians, household garage sales, door-to-door sales, or children's enterprise or neighborhood party.
So it's already excluded within the definition,
Correct.
or addressed, garage sales are addressed within that definition, that they're not a temporary use.
Okay, how are
There
they
needs a
addressed
permit.
currently now?
What's that?
Are they addressed at all in our code?
Yes, in the definition of what a temporary use is. The
It says-
definition says temporary uses do not include street musicians / entertainers, household garage sales, door-to-door sales, children's enterprises, or neighborhood parties.
Okay,
So it's already addressed.
let me ask you this question then. Has that issue ever been brought up to you as a concern of the neighborhood that those people are always having a garage sale?
Not here.
Not here. I know I've had the same experience, not here too.
But yeah, it's a little challenging when you do end up with somebody that starts running a business of used goods, the every weekend yard sale. So luckily, we're not having to address that here.
Well, then I would suggest let's not discuss it any further and let it be the way it is. And if it becomes an issue, we'll address it at that time.
That's where I am on
Okay.
that one. Okay, so
Okay,
we're gonna leave it as is, Jen.
perfect. Moving down then. Let's see, next item, refer to my general comments above, add new subsection 4. See where it says comment. Oh, how do I do it here? Comment 2 is down at item 4 that I think we've already covered this. To read and reassign subsequent subsections, the city planning director shall be the final review and approval authority of all TUP applications unless. So I think that's getting at the same comment that we just made a few minutes ago in that
Yes.
section.
Yes, it has.
Moving on. Okay, so this is where we were talking about, Larry, already the purpose statement. You had suggested inserting it here at the top, and I think what we'll do is just insert an applicability after the purpose. So I think we're covered there. Ken had a suggestion to reverse the order of 4 and 5 under C procedure.
It was a fast attempt to address the same issue that Larry and Lee brought up, that was confusing how it was worded. And so I thought if you just said the city council will review these items if they have between 9 PM and 7 AM, or if they're longer than 180 days. And then the second paragraph would be, city planner may refer other temporary use permits to city council as well. So that's kind of the way I thought it might clear it up. But either way, the way that Larry and Lee suggested is fine with me.
Jen, I want to go with what we already decided.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Perfect.
It just needed to be clarified.
Yes.
Okay. This was a good question. Do these time periods, 45 days, 14 days, 21 days, relate to some amount of activity that has to take place currently, or is this based on an older timeline?
Yeah.
Karen, I thought maybe you could respond to that one.
The answer is yes. Those are existing timelines as they appear in the regulations. They are timelines that work for us. And they do really provide a reasonable amount of time to address the different aspects of what's going on. So if it's somebody, a mobile food vendor, like the truck you occasionally see next to Beer Works, or some of those types of things, they come in and we're able to do those pretty quickly over the counter. And then if it's the special event, like the old fashioned 4th of July, something like that, those do require quite a bit of time to process and review. So that 45 days as a minimum prior to the event, we absolutely have to keep. And then I think the 21 days referred to when something gets routed to city council. It's the same thing because there's a 10-day notice period that has to happen prior to city council looking at something. So it does move it along pretty quickly that it comes in the doors. Staff only has it for a very short period of time, relatively speaking, before, we're getting the notices out the door to property owners and then getting the property posted prior to that city council meeting. So I would like to keep those timelines as they currently are prescribed because they are working.
So I have a question and probably address, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, but whether or not there's a bit of a possible catch-22. Says for outdoor vendor permit applications subject to city council review, then it's 21 days.
Yes.
Does that subject to city council review, could that be as a result of staff referring it to city council?
Then they have too little time.
Yeah, because you come in on day 16 days to go and you're like, I'm good. And then you say, no, city council, and you see that and like, oh crap, now I'm not good. And that seems, is that situation a possible situation, or am I missing something?
No, when they come in, typically with an outdoor vendor, they're looking for more than the 180 days. That's when you see those types of applications potentially go to city council. And we're screening for that as soon as it comes in the door.
So that's what that means when it says subject to city council review. You're really saying in excess of 180 days.
Typically. So the bottom line is if somebody brings in an application and they're asking for longer time of day operations or more than that 180 days, that's when we work with the applicant and say, hey, this is going to take longer than 7 days or 14 or whatever it is to get this processed. So since this has to go to city council, this is what the timeline looks like. It's not like we wait to the end of that time period before we go, oh, sorry. No, that's just bad customer service. So no, we're not doing it that way. We will
Well, I mean,
work
you
with the
could-
customer upfront when the application comes through the door in terms of what is the expected timeline.
I mean, they could come in the door and you could service it within the hour, but if there's only 15 days left and you suddenly need city council review, then they're going to walk away awfully disappointed. So,
We really try to avoid that. So it is, we look at applications quickly. What else needs to happen? Does this need a different path for referral or decision making? Get that set up as soon as possible.
so if they assumed 14 days and there was a bad assumption, it's on them.
Well, we try to catch it as soon as it comes to the door. And it's like, well, we recognize that if it didn't need this, it's 14 days, but because you're asking for X, it triggers this additional timeline.
Okay, all right.
I had a comment in this area too, just raising the question, all of these dates are should dates, which is a construction I hate to see in ordinances and in statutory construction. But as I thought about it, it was maybe just meant to provide some slack there so that you can do it. If you don't have time, it's an absolute date. Sorry, you're too late. But if you do have time and it's something you want to do, you can go ahead and accept an application late if it'll all work.
There are instances where you end up with the community event, and it comes to the door at the 9th hour and not 45 days in advance. And that is highly problematic. And we move every boulder to try and make that happen so that that event goes off for this community.
And the should allows you to do that, but if it doesn't work, they didn't make it. I mean, I say it's not the best way to draft, but I thought it might be a practical way to deal with these problems.
It's current language.
Exactly.
You notice that I didn't say that this is mandated. I'm okay with it. You know, again, of all the sections of our code, this is the section that's reasonably functioning. Seriously, this part actually functions. So it's more about just restructuring. I'm really, because you notice there's very little strikeout revision in terms of what we brought you. So for whatever that's worth.
I had my question answered. Thank you. No request to change the time. I just wanted to understand if it was legacy times that we needed to revisit or not. And it sounds like they're current times that we're using today and they work, so I can move on.
Functional legacy times.
That's fine.
Still a good question.
I like that.
Still a good question.
All right. Are we ready to move on, Karen?
I think so.
Okay, it sounded like we were. Number 8 is in TUP classifications, outdoor permits. The last sentence says such uses and their associated temporary structures shall be only permitted in non-residential zone districts. And the question is, do we need to spell out the zone districts rather than just well, it says residential, but
But
can
non-residential.
non-residential, yeah. That residences are allowed in some commercial districts, so, good question. Karen, do you have an answer for that?
I was going to say the answer is that this actually appears as a line in the use table. Special events that require a special event permit in accordance with this section.
So the zone districts are listed under uses as permitted.
Shows in the use table. Yes,
Okay,
it's permitted.
because if
Can
you
you
said
define-
residential zones, I would assume it's suburban residential, urban residential, multifamily and multifamily, but does that include neighborhood commercial? Because there's residences in there? I would think not, but
Well,
you know what, somebody could be confused. And I just thought, well, maybe we just put in parentheses, in these zones, it's not permitted.
maybe even more direct is just
Or permitted in these other zones.
reference the use table, and that way they can't be in.
Yeah, that's fine too.
That way they have to agree.
So if it's specifically lined in the use table, you had a copy here, right? Oh, that's not everything.
Where is this comment on the screen, Jen?
Doesn't have everything.
It's number 8 right here, Karen, under outdoor vendor permits.
Would be permitted in non-residential zoning districts. And in that parentheses, I'd put which ones they are.
Oh, okay.
But then it's duplicated if that is a duplicate from what's in the use table.
And actually, again, this is the part that functions. Yeah, outdoor vendor operations also shows in that use table. So it shows both special events and then outdoor vendors that require this permit. Both of those actually show in the use table.
So just add to that sentence as listed in the use table. And that's good.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
So we need to add per land use table
Yep.
or per use table? Okay.
What section is the use table in? Okay.
Let's see, number 9. This is just a clarification on wording. To add a 2 before the insure. Right of ways to insure, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Ironically, I think that was there and it got deleted. That's okay, we'll put it back.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you give me the numbers? I was right on it.
And back to the time limits,
Actually, almost.
there was a comment about use of the word should for application time limit.
We covered it.
We're talking-
Applications for special use should be filed.
Yeah, Jen, we covered that. That was part of what Lee was talking about a few minutes ago in terms of language construct of should versus shall or must. We landed on we're comfortable with should.
So it is
Okay.
commercial.
11. Add the word applicable, not all TUP require public hearing.
Exactly.
11. Temporary use permit applications shall adhere to the common review procedures in section 6.02. That still references the administrative process, so maybe, this is where this whole section, we've been trying to work on this, I think, over several meetings, is how to exactly word this. So I think you're right. I think having applicable common review procedures makes the most sense.
Certainly, you're not going to have a public hearing for administrative decision.
Right. Then you're just addressing exactly the applicable standards and not the ones that would not apply. All right, number 12, we're back down to the statement of number 4 that that one, staff may refer any application to the city council for final review and action. There's a comment saying it seems a bit arbitrary. Can we try to give some sort of circumstances? And I think we've addressed this comment based on the language that we're adding. But I just wanted to highlight that one. Do we still feel that we're okay on this one, or do we?
Well, I'm not sure.
Based on what language?
Created examples of what that pertains to. It's at the discretion of the city planner, right? The planning department,
Yes.
but you would
So
only
I-
do that for what reasons?
Typically if, well, for some reason I'm like really uncomfortable with what they're asking for. And I can't give you a good example. We really try to avoid that and handle things, but there just may be something that it's like,
Like a outdoor blood drive.
yeah,
That'd be a little weird.
I don't know. Um,
Oh, we,
Yeah, or I see this also functioning as a situation when somebody's really not happy with staff or a restriction or limitation that staff wants to assign, because we have that ability to put
Right.
terms and conditions on something. And it's like, well, I want to hear from somebody else. I don't like what you're saying. So
Gotcha.
then you got that ability to where council can act essentially as the appeal body or the decision maker, and they can decide staff, this was a crazy condition. No, we're going to delete this, or, oh no, staff was right. You have to do it this way. So that's what that's really for.
well, but I mean, the appeals very well spelled out, but like I said, there seems to be no criteria or standard for what would be subject to city council review based on,
Again, you
Sure.
can't, I'm not inclined to try and put huge boundaries on that. First of all, we haven't needed it. And then second of all, Larry's actually worked for organizations where with just about any application, staff has that ability to refer it to a different board for a decision. And that's where you rely on your professional staff to work as hard as we can to handle things at that administrative level, because nobody really wants to go to the hearing unless they're really dissatisfied with something. So I'm reasonably comfortable with it. I've not had to exercise it in 3 years since I've been here.
If the city staff thinks that it needs to go to the city council, I think we should let it go. And this is an example of a substantive kind of change that we're not really trying to do here. We're trying to.
All right.
This section isn't really broken, so let's just
No,
keep it as it is.
Don was wanting to know if it needed criteria. I'm happy with it being at the discretion of the planner, which is the way it is today. But it is interesting to know what you might use it for.
yeah.
So I got my information. I'm
And
happy.
I wasn't meaning to imply to take that authority away, but just give some clarity on how and when it might be exercised.
Because the inverse of that is if you end up with everything landing in front of city council, that staff is not making any decisions. And at a certain point, they're going, Karen, why do we have you? And that's a whole other uncomfortable chat, around why isn't planning doing what planning should be doing? Why are these decisions not happening where they should be happening? So it really is more that relief mechanism, that's used rarely, and wisely. So,
And it's certainly not being abused either way by staff or the applicants
Yeah.
at this point, so it's no big deal.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it whenever there's some discretion. I always want to see that there's some yardstick we're using,
I know.
to say, that's just good. What's that? Yeah, you got it. But in terms of authorities, it's like, I always want to know, like, also, when do I have my final answer? I mean, so I want to protect both sides of the equation. Yeah, no, but you were spot on.
Certainly nothing I want to see codified, but a strategy I used to employ decades ago when I was a planning director is that if you're disagreeing with what I'm telling you about the process or the requirements and so on, I'd be glad to set up a meeting with you, myself, and the city manager, and we can talk about it.
yeah, there's other ways to work through things.
Yeah.
The other way to maybe look at this is one of the last places you can point to where we're relying on common sense. It's right there where there isn't a very firm upper and lower limit. And at some point when somebody abuses that, then you end up, writing it into an inch of its life. But at the moment, we're still holding on to common sense and level-headed, and trained professionals.
You mean you can't regulate common sense?
No, that's been proven.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be good.
I didn't cite any specific reference.
Okay, I think we're ready, Jen.
Okay, well, now that we just had that whole conversation, I have one suggestion. Should we change this to planning director may refer any application? Because it's really at your discretion, Karen, not just generally staff.
Probably should be for consistency with how we've got other things worded.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was a good catch, Jen. We did try to edit this section for those type of things where we have been changing terminology, but that's why we do value these discussions with you guys, because you help us catch those. That type of fine tooth comb can be challenging to hit every one of those first time through.
Perfect. Let's see, it looks like we need to remove a comma. Event permit or outdoor permit. Okay, that's fair enough. And then item 14, we're back down to that same comment or same area.
The reason
Should we
that
review-
language, I have language that was in the original ordinance and it dropped that the staff presenting at city council shall recommend passage with conditions or denial, which you can probably live without, but it is current language. And it would fit very smoothly after saying it may be referred to city council. I don't think it's anywhere else. I think it got dropped.
I don't think it existed, but okay.
Yeah, I was trying to scroll down to the existing language there. 1862.050.
What are you referring to, Lee? Where?
18.62.050
Uh-huh.
says in the event that the request forwarded to the city council for final action, the city manager / designee shall make a recommendation to the city council on whether to approve with conditions, or deny the application. If the application is referred to the city council, the city manager shall set the matter on the city council meeting agenda for as early a date as practicable. I think did we want to omit that text or?
Yes, we did, and for a variety of reasons, because the process related to setting hearings is spelled out in other places. So it really is unnecessary, given the six.
As I said, if
2.
it's deliberate to remove it, that's,
Yeah,
And-
yes. Then in this new language, section F, there's even a review note there that says current section 18.62.050 in E, that it talks about the city, so that's very broad. So whether it's staff or the council can impose conditions, on a use. And then, it might not say that you can be denied, but that's implied in any application. I mean, it's review criteria, it's not approval criteria. I mean, no, we've had that like conversation like 3 times. It's review criteria. Because even, most applications that come before you all for public hearings, whether it's a conditional use permit or a subdivision, staff's already worked with those folks pretty extensively. So you're seeing the polished version. So that's why it's rare that you've got something in front of you where staff's going, we recommend you deny this request. Chances are it's approved with conditions, because we've already worked to get them to a degree of compliance before y'all are seeing it. So.
That does seem to be consistent with how the city council generally functions, is they'll ask staff for, a summary review of the action that they're about to.
as
So,
I said, I don't have any particular objection to it, but
Okay.
it was some procedure there that exists now and was being deleted and it should at least be called to our attention. Anyone have any questions about it?
yeah. Seems like it's covered elsewhere, I guess.
So I think I captured from that all that language that Lee was suggesting is covered in other sections, so we're good to not bring that back in.
I think that's where we are, Jen.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think we've had this question before. Who acts for the planning director when the planning director is absent? Should provisions be made explicitly for all purposes and not just TUPs? I'm trying to remember in the review and decision making body section where we defined those. I think we actually defined, and I can pull it up, that who would act in place of the planning director.
Can you scroll back up, Jen, to where that section is, where that comment related to?
Can you repeat that question?
Scroll.
Can you scroll your screen back up so we can see where that comment was related to in the document?
How did I get scrolled down? I don't even.
You went down to
remember.
that F section, Karen's benefit.
Right, went down there to look for that last nugget. Okay. And it's just where we're referencing planning director here, and I think Lee's comment is a little more global, just to state what happens when the planning director is absent, who steps in.
We talked about this before, and I frankly wasn't sure where we ended up on the subject of this. The topic is one that really calls for some general language. When you say the city manager does something or the planning director does something.
Okay.
There-
I'm
there
not sure we
should
just
be-
want to say staff to always cover this, and we just made a decision 5 minutes ago to insert planning director.
Well, we've seen the
Mhm.
person or designee before.
Right, but even that shouldn't be required, because under what defines who is the planning director, there should be some language to say in the event of that the planning director permanent position is vacant or they're not available, blah, 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 who steps in. We should do that once,
It should-
And
exactly,
same
it
for
should-
city
it should be
manager.
once The code somewhere for all.
and then
of
we
us.
just say planning director, and then that applies.
Okay.
That's the way I see it.
The other part of that is we have a city manager. So if the planning director position is vacant, chances are they will be appointing somebody as the acting or interim planning director.
All right,
So that's how that gets handled. That's a management thing that's, I believe, part of that manager's authority in terms of managing daily operations for the city of Woodland Park. So that's where that gets handled. It does not need to be spelled out here. Because it's true of any situation. What if the wastewater guru is gone, you know, and we're without one? What do we do then?
Is it spelled out anywhere?
Jen's got something on the screen.
I,
We did add it at the end of the description of the planning director's powers
go.
and duties. We said, in the absence of the planning director, the city manager shall act as the planning director.
and they very well could appoint somebody else to fill that role for them.
Absolutely.
So, and then
Okay.
That's fine, although I don't know that we need, if we're gonna do it that way, then we may have to do it a bunch of other places too.
Well, no, all we have to
Exactly.
do is say,
Find a way to do it generic.
all we have to do is say planning director, and then if for some reason that person's on vacation or the position vacant, that clause there tells you that city manager,
That was under the planning director definition, not in this section.
yeah, so
He
it's,
pulled that up from another.
so if we just say planning director, then that all applies, and I think we're good. Right?
Okay, well, where is that? That's a,
it's early in chapter 6. We talked about this many months
okay,
ago.
we got it then, fine.
Yeah, where we
It's-
talked about the role of each of the different boards. There's also a little section on city engineer, there's planning director. What our bigger issue is, and please don't fix this tonight, is how we refer to this throughout the code. Planning director or designee, planning staff. What is the appropriate term that we want to plug in? Chances are it's going to be planning director, since that's the term that's defined early in chapter 6, and it's spelled out. You saw Jen had a list there of what falls under planning director roles and responsibilities. So,
Okay,
all right.
Yeah, and we mentioned the designee in this section as well, which is kind of the preferred approach to this, where you're just in one place saying or their designee. So you can just say planning director everywhere else.
Okay, I think we're good, Jen.
Perfect. Item 16, please bumps up to the next page here. Let me double check. Yes. Okay, so under submittal requirements, it says graphic example or brief statement of the nature and character of the signage or advertising. And the suggestion is to remove the word example and replace with depiction or something similar. So graphic depiction or brief statement. I think that's a fair comment.
yeah,
Go with it.
Perfect. 17, back up here near the top of the page, there's a statement, and I'm just gonna scooch back here because we're at the end of the procedure section. Says the city council has issued a temporary permit in the past, then subsequent permit requests may be administratively approved if all temporary use circumstances are substantially unchanged from the original application. The suggestion is after subsequent permit requests, insert for the same temporary use. So it would say subsequent permit requests for the same temporary use may be administratively approved.
just a clarification.
I think we're
I
good
mean,
with
we
that,
already know
Jen.
they've issued many temporary permits, so
Okay,
there's no
I agree.
content in that.
Okay, we'll make that change.
Say again?
Well, I'm just
Make that
confirming, we'll make
Yes.
that change.
Perfect. There's a suggestion, if the city council has issued a temporary use permit in the past to say city council or planning director, and I think that's fair, that this is.
If the
Well-
planning director issued it in the past, it was
Right.
administrative the first time. So this really just refers to things that go to the city council.
You're right, no, it's only, you only need the sentence if the city council did it before.
Correct.
Yeah, so that doesn't really apply. to
makes
what we're
sense.
Trying to cover here.
Yep.
So we don't need that one.
Nope. Strike.
Correct, okay. Let's see. 19, again, at the end of that statement, it says, and no complaints or issues have ever been received by the city. I think it says received the city, we need to add by, so that's good. Have to add the word by, so it reads
Yep.
received by the city. 20, moving down to submittal requirements again. Let's see. change in this section where we refer to registered agent of the corporation, change it to its registered agent, since the sentence applies to more than just corporation. Applicant is a firm, corporation, or other legal entity. Its registered agent shall be identified on the application. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. 21, fill in submittal requirements, written description of the type, nature, and extent of the proposed request. The suggestion is to remove requests and replace with temporary use or structure. Extent of the proposed temporary use or structure. I could go either way on that one.
I'm comfortable with it as it is.
Just with request.
Yes.
Okay. We already addressed 22 early in the conversation. Adding that item C to clarify staff review. 23, down in review criteria, when considering an application for any temporary use and or temporary structure, planning director shall evaluate, and the idea is to add the word permit. So when considering an application for any temporary use permit rather than temporary use or structure. Thoughts on that one?
Seems okay. I don't know.
It's
It's what we're
consistent
talking
with
about,
the rest of
temporary
the
use
section.
permit. Is that okay, Karen?
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to figure out what are we
At
trying
the
to
beginning
do?
of the sentence is when considering an application for any temporary use and or temporary structure, we want to just change it to application for any temporary use permit, which would be for a use or structure, but just refer back to the,
Yeah, okay, you can change that. I'm all right.
Okay. All right. Now we've got a nice long one from Lee. Appropriateness of the term city depends on its definition, which is not clearly established in original review.
Let's
Hold on,
just,
we're-
let's
scroll
move on.
down
We've
to-
addressed this.
Oh, I was gonna say, because I don't know where this, what's the comment this is referring to, but what,
yeah,
paragraph?
scroll down a little bit. I think 24 is down below, I think. Maybe not.
So we're down in permit conditions. The city may impose such conditions.
Everyone's just tired of the subject too. The city may impose. And when we tried to define city, remember it was originally defined as city council in one definition. And I don't think anyone here knows how the definition ended up for the word city.
Well, we have talked about this in other situations where sometimes we said city in general terms, because depending on who the approval authority was or the review body was, it would just be,
We
Insert
know-
that
we'd know
here.
Better if we knew what the final definition of city was, but because that definition was up in the air, I think.
okay.
I mean, we could say the temporary use permit approver or authorizer can impose such conditions as deemed necessary, or the approval authority.
Approval authority.
It's either the planning director or the city council, depending on which path it goes.
Yeah, I read city in this case to mean approval authority, which could be planning director, could be city council, depending on the conditions. Hence,
Or-
hence not specifying.
Or you get rid of the who, and it just says conditions
As, yeah,
may be imposed as deemed necessary.
Yep.
Passive construction,
that's the best.
Uh,
Fewer words
drafting.
directly to the point is the best.
Yep.
So conditions
May be
may be imposed as deemed necessary to protect the integrity of the underlying zoning district.
And by whom? Must be the city.
Must be by the approval authority.
The implied decision maker.
Let's not fall on that crutch too often.
Yeah,
Just,
keep it
just
I have the
say,
biggest stick. May impose conditions.
Okay. Good resolution on that one.
hmm,
Now we are into item 25, which is at the top of the page here, and it's within the review criteria. Speaking about site triangles,
Yeah,
the
well,
comment is it's used in both the TUP and sign section.
the
which
point I
should
was
use
making is that
definition.
we have an elaborate
just a-
definition.
Sorry, what were you saying, Lee?
Say, the point I was making, we have an elaborate definition in the sign section of what a site triangle is. And now we cross-reference it in temporary use permit. Probably site triangle should be moved to the definition section and referred to the definitions, and in the sign section, it'll refer to the definition.
That's probably a good idea, because I had to go back into the sign section to really understand
So
what a site.
better to go to definitions rather than sign section. There's a
Okay.
couple sentences in the sign section that define it and appear generic that would apply to both.
So-
And one other thing, I was surprised that site triangle didn't appear anywhere else in the ordinance. 'Cause every time we put a new plat out, don't you look about not putting buildings in the site triangle? I'm not trying to draft it now, but it seems
Been
to me the
missing it every
concept,
time we've had a
concept
meeting.
could apply elsewhere.
Okay,
Other than-
so
Always bugs me.
it's funny that you were picking on this, and I'm gonna back up the bus here a little bit to make sure Jen's with us. So the whole conversation, Jen, is the fact that site triangle appears in the sign regulations and not in a more generalized location like under definitions, which really would make sense. That then both the sign regulations and this would then point to that definition and specifics around what is a site triangle. And the reason I am smirking so much over here is I've actually tried looking for that in definitions and have found exactly all the points you gentlemen are pointing out as being problematic with where it's located now, because it really does apply in many situations beyond just placing a sign. So that is something that does need to be addressed. So that's part of the reason I'm recapping, to make sure Jen caught that so that we can get that to happen.
So life hack, one of the smartest things I've learned over the years is always put something the first place you would look for it. And if definitions is the first place you would look for it, then that's where it belongs.
In that case, you don't even have to say, look at definitions, because that's where people go anyway.
Yeah.
So what I hear is that let's create a new definition under definitions.
Well, we probably have all the language we need.
Oh, it's
It
a
just
good
needs-
definition of science, 30 sentences.
Put it in the right place.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think there's even a little picture.
The sign,
That goes
there
with
is, the sign was, don't put a sign between 3 feet and 8 feet high in the site triangle. Then have a couple sentences that say what a site triangle is.
Yeah, so Jen's pulled it up on her screen there, so.
Yep.
There you go. Hey, beautiful.
Yeah, this is a pretty clear definition that just needs to move to the definition chapter. I agree with that.
Yep.
Okay, we're good on that.
We all agree on that.
Good,
Perfect.
good catch. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great catch. 27. Let's see, why drop additional review agencies, WPPD and Netco, for example?
Where does that appear on, oh,
Well, the note sits down here, 27, right above permit conditions, but I think it's referring to this licensing section where we're referring to Teller County,
Yeah, in the.
maybe?
Yeah, in the original, it specifies that that review would be done by those agencies or some of those agencies. And it just doesn't appear in the new one. And I don't know, I just thought it was kind of important that whoever's applying understands that, you know, PD, fire, that type of stuff is gonna look at, or at least be advised of it, kind of like when notices are sent out for.
but I'm 99.9% sure that's actually addressed under common review procedures. Because we do that with just about any application that comes through the door.
All right, I wasn't sure. if it
Most
was
of them get referred, which would be why it was eliminated from here, since it's in that other section.
All right, if it's in there, that's good.
So we're good.
I guess. getting notices
28.
is separate from all this review. Two separate things.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over whoever was talking.
They were talking very quietly, so I couldn't hear them either.
They were trying to talk under you anyway, Jen. Go ahead.
Side bench.
Okay, so where are we, Jen?
All right, so 28 here at the bottom of the page in permit conditions. Let's see. This, so we're talking about conditions that may be imposed. This may include, but is not limited to, setting requirements for or imposing restrictions upon size, mass. Of course, there's a little flip right over that.
Yeah,
It's massing, M-A-S-S-I-N-G.
Okay. Size, massing, location, open space. Now I forgot where not sure massing is going to be clear to our audience. I would like to hear suggested alternative language.
I don't have one.
That's-
That's one of those.
You're talking about weight bearing?
Is it architectural massing or
So like it doesn't sink in the mud? Is that what we're talking
clustering
about?
buildings or
It
people?
could be any of that. I'm not sure. It's current language. It's,
So under architectural terms, there's a term massing, which is putting multiple structures together to make a structure. And then there's the massing together of people. And I would interpret that most people will think this is some kind of people thing.
I
not-
read it as saying, what's the density of the use? And it could be by 10 temporary structures all squished up against each other, or it could be something where the people are got no room or.
I just thought it was
Right.
open to so much interpretation, it wouldn't be clear to the audience, but we can leave it there and use it as we need it, but most people probably won't think much about it.
We're just,
I just wanted to ask the question if there was a better term.
it's one of those terms that's helpful when you need it. And if you don't, it doesn't hurt anything by having it there. Cause I forget who was saying it, whether it was Lee, it can go to, some of these festivals have all kinds of vendors that have tents. So what's the spacing between tents or clustering, as well as just density of people. So I think it can go multiple directions, but, I'm comfortable keeping it is where I am.
keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me to leave it. I just wanted to ask the question if there was something better, like style of structures or.
It's a tent. People are not happy with architectural design standards now. Don't make me impose them on a tent. Just,
Got to have the look and feel of the West, Mountain Western.
I think we're good keeping it as is, Jen.
Is there a tent
Okay.
that's not Mountain Western?
Everything must be green and brown.
All right,
Yeah.
let's see here. We are on 29. Under licensing, we're talking about the applicant shall obtain approval from the Teller County Department of Health and Environment for the applicant's food and drink dispersal.
I
And
think
the,
Ken's improvement by a lot. Dispersal is like when you throw the drink on the ground. Service is when you serve it to somebody.
So the food and drink dispersal, if any and or is no comma. So that's the first correction, to put a comma between if any, then comma, and or the applicant's use of animals is the next section. So I think the comma needs to be added. And then food dispersal is an unusual term. I thought food service might be better. Food or drink service.
Yeah, I like service better there.
They probably would prefer sales.
That works too.
Well, there's people who may be dispersing food and drink without sales. It could be,
Service.
Which is how we got to dispersing. Cause it's
I know, but that's why I thought, well,
sales and
it's food and drink
service.
service,
Service.
whether you're selling it or divvying it away. It's just an option. You can keep it if you want,
It's an improvement.
but I like the other word better, and so does Lee.
So what do you want to keep it as? What's the direction?
Food and drink service, applicant's food and drink service, if any, comma, and or the applicant's use of animals, comma, if any.
Is that animals to serve the food or?
I didn't quite understand exactly what all the use of animals are. It might just be a petting zoo,
Yeah, that's what I was.
little
thinking,
riding
petting zoos
thing,
or
or,
something. Monkeys bringing.
but those are two distinct items that require the extra
So you-
review.
So you only need the license for animal if you're dispersing food. Is that how?
We don't want to.
Okay, it got quiet there. So did everyone agree with that suggestion?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes, Jen.
Okay. Perfect. I think this next comment is related to the previous comment. Don, can you verify that?
Yeah, that got in there twice by accident.
He said it was a duplicate comment, Jen.
Okay, perfect.
I put it in and everything disappeared and I went back and it wasn't there, so.
And
One. Okay, this is in the review criteria section. Impacts, the temporary use and structure shall minimize potential negative impact. It lists a few things. Looks like we're suggesting add including the provision of adequate water availability, disposal of wastewater and trash, and discharge of drainage. So we're minimizing the negative impacts on traffic, emergency, municipal services, neighborhood character, and the adequate water availability. Oh, I see. You're saying, and add in something about the provision of water with trash.
municipal services, including the provision of, so on
Okay,
and so forth.
you're not saying they have to provide water to the people.
No, no, just the provision.
I didn't quite capture that answer.
We're not hearing you, Larry. What?
No, we're adding on to municipal services, comma, including the provision of adequate water availability, disposal of wastewater, trash, and the discharge of drainage. Or just keep it municipal services,
I think we should just keep it as is,
okay?
because I think that additional language is potentially confusing. So many, because they're so temporary in nature, there's water is typically something sold by a vendor somewhere along the line. Trash is something we're always looking at as part of, just clean up, leave no trace from your event. And so many of these are, if you're taking care of people, it's all porta johns. So it's not like anybody's ever connecting to those water and sewer service for the city for the temporary event. Because if they're doing those kind of connections, it's not temporary so much, and then you're into other permitting would be my take on it.
So when you look at an application, you want to see a porta potty somewhere for a special event.
Depending upon what's going on, yes.
And does this give you the ability to ask for that?
We do that through the referrals,
Okay,
so it's part of what it just gets looked at in general, is how many people are there, where's this come from?
I'm just
Yeah,
trying to put some more ammo in your gun.
okay.
Sound like she doesn't think she needs it.
Let it be,
Anna.
let it be.
We're gonna let it be, Jen.
Okay. So we're not adding that,
Yeah,
correct?
31 is no change.
All right. Item 32. That takes us to the next page here. Suggests legal review as to whether citation should be statutory authority for appeal rather than that to the CRCP. I have the same question on that, so I think we need to toss that to our legal counsel.
Yeah, just
On
keep a yellow highlight on that provision, so when you ultimately send it to legal, they'll have it, but usually you don't refer people to call it the rules of civil procedure, you give them, where's the authority for bringing the action?
I understand. We carried this
Perfect.
over exactly, so.
Okay. I agree with inserting a comma. We've tried to capture those throughout, so thank you for that comment. I think it's number 33 here. Suspend, comma, revoke, should be say comma or deny. All right, this one, I'm wondering, I already put a little comment in here. It's item 34, here at the end. No temporary use permit issued pursuant to this chapter shall be assignable. And I think we might be all on the same page here, but the comment is, the chapter reference seems broader than appropriate. I'm wondering if it should be referencing this section rather than this chapter.
I think section is what you are, but we need to make certain all through this, we keep track of what are the levels of division. There's a code, there's a chapter, there's a section, there's a paragraph, whatever we choose to use, that we're consistent.
I'm pretty sure I looked at that, and in our current regulations,
Well, it says chapter in the current regulations because it is a chapter.
exactly, and it's referring to it as, I did go back and look at that as opposed to title section. So it is all of chapter 18, which does make some sense when you're putting into play the use table and then general review procedures. So I'm actually okay with the broader.
No, actually, no, 18 is a title. Chapter was the what, 0.62 or something? The chapter is a smaller subdivision. 18 is a title.
Okay, yep, you're correctly, sorry.
So to keep it as equivalent to chapter is here, something like, I think it's section. But
So
I
should
mean-
we say like chapter 6, section something?
or this section.
Maybe we reference this exact section number.
I, like that, legal might want to provide guidance in terms of what we should be referring to. It's because it may be broader than just this section.
That's a good point, Karen, because one thing I had thought of is we could just say no temporary use permit issued shall be assignable and take out the pursuant to this chapter.
That's,
Um,
that's a much better approach that Jen have, just
Lee's saying go for it that way.
any temporary use permit, no temporary use permits is assignable, however you want to word it, but
what did you say, Karen? That would be okay?
Yeah, Lee was saying go for what you were just saying. No temporary use
Okay.
permit issued shall be assignable.
Okay, perfect, thank you. 35. Sorry, I'm just trying to read the two together here. It's under appeal procedures towards the end of the sentence. And it says, it seems to be implied, but probably better to be explicit, that any impacted individual would have the right to appeal a granted application. Administrative decision to approve or deny. Okay, so generally we may need to clarify that a little bit more.
Yeah, and it goes with the next one. The next paragraph is very explicit that basically anyone could appeal an approval. But I had a further question, related question. To appeal, do they have to have some standing in the matter? I mean, I'm not trying to get too legalistic here, but if, you know, if they live in Fort Worth, you know, why would they have the right to an appeal? You know, whether or not we have a hot dog stand. So, thoughts?
Oh,
if we don't cover it, then they'll have to find the right to appeal themselves. They'll have to find them, that they have standing, as you said.
Right. So,
I don't see the exact sections we're talking about here. This is G, appeal procedure somewhere.
yeah,
it would
G
be-
one, it really goes to 1 and 2, paragraphs 1 and 2 under G.
I'm having flashbacks to Oregon. That this is actually potentially a much broader topic that's not, it's certainly not centralized in our code. I'm not sure where it's addressed, and it's definitely in legal land. Because in Oregon, they're very specific about who has standing to appeal decisions.
And I mean, it's very specific. And that can be written as its own section within the code. I'm not, like I said, I'm in the wrong state at the moment. So I'm not 100% sure where to go on this without doing some research or what's best for this particular document as it's being pulled together, as well as the analysis of where else do we potentially have some of this type of language. And it may vary by application type. It may not be as universal as what the state of Oregon has spelled out. It's potentially a big issue is, I guess, what I'm saying at the moment. So, and how this particular section would be applied at this point in time?
I mean, of all the places that subject might come up, this is probably the least worrisome, but
Odds are it would be somebody who, well, if it's a planning director decision, it's probably just the person getting the permit that's going to appeal, because those like a special event, it's not like it's noticed to neighbors or anything, or even food vendors.
But it does create an appeal right, and once again, it does rules of civil procedure is the appeal right. I'm not sure that's the reference you want to use.
Well, and the next one is that the
My intent
applicant,
is when I had legal review, they would review this reference as well.
so it's that point two, the second, number 2, where it says the applicant whose permit application is denied may appeal. So between those,
or
Yeah,
Two.
then it's like a new sentence, capital O, or when an application is granted, any person who filed a written objection may appeal the city council decision in accordance with. So if someone didn't like this in front of their house or in front of their store or something, and they quickly give a written notice, apparently they have a right to appeal.
Yeah.
Which, whatever right they're entitled to under state law, I think they ought to have, but I think we want to be very careful about trying to clarify. Because this is us saying when somebody can go to district court. And I think you want to have legal review of the section.
okay.
The entire section.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the first paragraph, they just appeal to the city council. It gets a little more serious in the second paragraph.
So, and I understand what's not clear. When you looking at this whole thing in context there, it sounds like it's really going to boil down to the person asking for the permit. If they don't like the planning director, the administrative decision, whether it's, I don't like that condition you attached, or you denied my application, within 3 business days, they can file that that request, to have city council review that. And then it's when, should city council, if it's denied, it's city council, like an applicant is.
Yeah.
Now, this is saying
There's
it goes
two
to the city
branches.
council, and what is somebody, probably.
if the city
applicant, but
council-
theory is somebody else.
If,
How do they-
if city council denies it, then they can go to court is what
Right.
this is
Right.
saying.
But
So it's not written great, but that's what it's trying to do.
but there's the second branch where if it's approved, someone else could appeal it. So and I
That's-
would,
that's
and
what-
I would see they have that.
says.
Yeah, and they should have that right. The first paragraph's a little, it's the fact that it says decision to approve or deny maybe, that's may be appealed, implies that not the applicant, if they're appealing the approval. I don't think the applicant would appeal the approval. So it's implied.
They
that
would
it's-
appeal if they didn't like it, or at criteria associated with it more than anything
Oh,
else.
is that what that's meant to say?
Yeah.
Oh, because,
Yeah.
yes, I had to read it 3 times, and what I took from it was basically any citizen could appeal an approval if they didn't like that.
No, it's really it's supposed to be focused more towards the person making the application. Because like I said, these don't go through the same notice process as a public hearing item when it's an
If it-
administrative review.
We change in the middle, in the beginning of this, the beginning of the paragraph, it's the applicant. The end of the paragraph, it's a person who filed a written objection.
Right.
But it's implied that it's the applicant filing the written objection is part
I
of
think
where it's
several of
going
us thought that brought another person to the table.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's not, but I can see where you think that, so we can. I agree it needs legal review, and I think we can clarify that.
All right.
Okay.
I would suggest going back to the Board of Adjustment section dealing with appeals. Pulling some language out of there.
Well, the board.
So,
yeah,
so
the Board of
having
Adjustment-
said all that, so let's pick on the Catholic Church. Let's say they're having fish fry for Lent, and my kid is deathly allergic to fish, and we're right downwind of it. I would want that person to have the ability to appeal it. I'm just giving a made up circumstance, but an appeal from someone could be a quite reasonable thing to do.
But like Karen said, there is no notification process for a temporary use permit. It doesn't go out to neighbors. There's not really any way for somebody to know what's coming till something's issued and it becomes a formal record of the city. They could see it there. Or if they get some kind of notice of approvals of things like that from the city alerts and that kind of thing. But you're not gonna,
Typically, you're not gonna know.
if it goes to city council, it'll be at a public hearing
Then
of
you
some
know.
kind. But it's really, so if Karen's saying this is really designed for an applicant who has a approved one with conditions that they may have an objection, they can appeal that as well. Let's just say that and leave it at that.
Okay, so the direction I have is we want to clarify this so that it reads better in terms of that intention of who's appealing, which really, in my mind, is the applicant appealing decisions. And then have it reviewed by legal. That's what I've got for direction. Nobody's arguing, Jen.
I'm not trying to drag us through it, but it's a weird conundrum where if it goes to city council, then any citizen has the right to appeal. If it doesn't go to city council, then they don't.
I think on temporary use permit, there's no notification process, but they could be at the hearing and comment on it, just public comment. But wouldn't they?
Yeah, when.
If they hear, but there's no notice to the neighbor of a
Right.
city council decision either.
Wait,
Right.
time out. When something is, when a temporary use permit is reviewed administratively, it is just at that staff level. We do referrals to other agencies that might have an interest or concern, especially around an event. All those comments are compiled. Anything that's brought up as an issue gets worked through, resolved, and then that decision is rendered by staff. If that person who's applying for that permit does not like that decision that was made by staff, they have 3 days to then file a request for city council to review that. That's the appeal. When it goes to city council, that does have some other notice requirements with it, where a sign is posted on the property and then a notice is mailed out to property owners, adjacent property owners, and that's 10 days prior to that city council meeting. So there is some notice for that immediate area when something goes to city council for an appeal, or even when those other conditions happen where somebody wants more than 180 days or
After 9 PM.
expanded hours of operation. There's the notice to the surrounding area that happens before it goes to city council. So people do have an opportunity to appear at council and express concerns or support.
Can I suggest that we highlight, rather than just the reference to the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure, the paragraph, and have legal counsel recommend what if anything should be said as far as appeal rights after it's gone to the city council, going to judicial appeals.
We did already flag that. We talked about that a little bit ago. That,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. My assumption was when I said legal counsel review, the reference would review the sentence as well.
Okay, so we're gonna clarify some of this language
Yep.
and we're gonna have it looked at by legal. That was where we all kind of settled.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
Perfect. You guys might have talked about this in that discussion. I couldn't quite pick up on this, but the next comment is that, asking if there's a posting process. For
Yeah.
temporary use permits. Did you
Yeah,
guys
we
already
covered
talk
my
about
comment.
that?
we did, and Ken's saying he's comfortable
Yeah,
that you consider that resolved.
yeah.
Okay,
He's saying yes, he considers that resolved.
Just say that's part of 35 and 36, same review with legal.
Putting in note.
Okay.
That's fine.
gosh, no change, Jen. Okay, and then the last comment is just that objective should say objection.
Yeah, I
in-
had written it objective instead of objection in my comment. And I clarified that I missed
Oh,
it.
gotcha.
Oh.
Perfect.
It wasn't in the document, it was in my comment. I said written objective instead of objection.
Okay,
That gets us through the temporary use
Correcting my own
permit section.
typos.
all right.
All right,
So that Jen was just saying that takes care of TUPs. So we're on to the use table or the section that I sent you all that has some suggested revisions to.
all right. Is that big enough for everyone?
I think so, Jen. And they've got,
Okay.
most folks seem to have their paper copy with them too. All right,
Perfect.
so this is set up very much like our current use table. So, you know, items 1, 2, 3 with the strikeout in it, that's how it appears in our current use table. So the left column is the uses, across the top are the zone districts. Jen's inserted a column called comments where she can take notes based on our conversation. And then the far right column that says use standards, that was that nod towards where we're headed with our use table. You know, we've talked quite often about different types of uses have specific use standards, and then you'll see that code section reference there. So in this situation right now, I'm referencing other existing language that ties back and forth between things. So it was an attempt to help you guys connect all the dots on that. So and then, like I said, we looked at what's permitted where, whether it's a use by right or a conditional use permit is required. And when you look at the use table as it's currently written, unless you want to do a single household, a single family home in one of those zone districts, or even in some of our commercial zone districts, or what was it? Oh, a duplex on a single platted lot. Ironically, in the commercial districts, it's a use by right, but in the multifamily zone districts, a duplex requires a conditional use permit. But it's very, very limited in terms of what just goes through that staff administrative review. So basically, single family homes and some duplexes. So that stays the same. The only change in terms of the use is under those duplexes in the multifamily zones, that instead of requiring a conditional use permit, that would be a use by right permitted. Since you're allowing them as a permitted use in a commercial zone, which is a whole other conversation that we're just gonna keep running with since that works for Woodland Park. That seemed like a reasonable change. Anytime else you're talking about apartment buildings, townhomes, manufactured home communities, all those get into requiring a conditional use permit as part of that process. That's as it is now. That's proposed to stay the same.
What's the blue highlighted blocks? What's,
That was to help show you right now, that particular category, number 6, is 1 or 2 dwelling units, parens duplex, per existing platted lot within a single structure in a commercial zone of neighborhood commercial, community commercial, and CBD commercial zone. That right now, it's listed as its own line item, but it's really a duplex or a single family home. So it doesn't need its own line item. They can get incorporated into those line items above. And then in that far right column where it says use standards, it references that other language that would still apply. I don't know what the new code section would be off the top of my head, but right now that code section is what says if you're doing a single family home or a duplex in one of these commercial zones, we do notice to the surrounding area that this application's been received and is under consideration. So it's additional standards associated with that use in those zones. So it gets connected that way. And the blue was just to show you where it went in terms of helping tracking things. So we're
Okay.
not losing anything.
so that's not a new permitted use. It's, you're just consolidated 2 lines into one, basically.
Or splitting it into 2 other existing lines, so it tracks more consistently with what the type of dwelling unit is. Yeah. And so the language we have right now, number 1 says 1 single family dwelling unit on a single platted lot. For ag zones, you refer to this other section, which is the agricultural zone specifications that include setbacks, that kind of things. The bottom line is the new terminology that's being proposed is dwelling, comma, single household detached on a single platted lot. And then the next one is that clustered residential development. Those currently are permitted conditionally. That one I thought would warrant a conditional use permit since you're looking at putting dwelling units in closer proximity to one another and then trying to preserve other natural features of the land. That seemed to make sense to me that really should be more of a conditional use permit. The next one, and this is where our current language is a little troubling, item 3 and 4. So 3 is 2 family dwelling units, i.e. a duplex, subject to section or chapter 17.32, which is the condominiums and townhomes, except for rental buildings, i.e. a single ownership apartment. I don't know what to tell you in terms of that, but so the suggestion is this new topic or new line that says dwelling, comma, duplex on a single platted lot. And that's where the definition of duplex is important because that's definition now says it is a building, 2 dwellings under that one roof on one lot. It's when somebody wants to do what the more current terminology is single family attached. Like Brecken Heights is a great example. All those duplexes going in over there across from Walmart, those are all platted. So each half of that duplex is on a lot that gets bought and sold separately. Those then fall into this next category that we're calling dwelling, comma, single household attached. So if somebody's wanting to do that type of project, or where you've got more than 2 dwelling units attached side by side, like more conventional townhouses, those would get classified in that category. So there is that possibility of subdividing that land so that each of those units has some land to go with it and is bought and sold that way. I said, as opposed to an older style duplex where you've got 2 dwellings, 1 ownership, 1 lot. So that's the distinction between those 2 categories. And that's probably one of the larger changes. The next category where we were referring to it as apartment buildings on a single lot. That's a dwelling, comma, multi-household. And these definitions that we'll talk about in a minute, pulled these out of the state model code. So, some of the best legal minds in the state were working on that project for the state of Colorado and pulling that information together. So they're about as well vetted as you're gonna get, around those kind of things. Accessory dwelling unit is in there. That's our current term. Right now, we have that listed as permitted conditionally, but that really is essentially that same thing as it's permitted, but you need to meet these use standards, which is right now in section 18.33.135. Dwelling, comma, manufactured homes in an existing or approved mobile home park in accordance with Title 16. Ironically, we don't have any of those. All of our mobile home parks are non-conformities, but that would be a permitted use in that mobile home park. So, and right now, even within our existing mobile home parks, if somebody's changing a unit out, that ability to change a unit in that mobile home park, that they can do without additional review by a board. It's done at a staff level.
So why did accessory dwelling unit go from committed or conditional to permitted?
It's permitted conditionally, which is a term that's not currently defined. And it essentially means you can do this in this zone, provided you meet certain conditions. And there's all those conditions are found in that 18.33.135.
Okay.
So from prior conversations, at least a year ago, when we went through the use table, we were looking at get rid of all the PCs. So it's
Okay.
either a conditional use permit
All right.
or it's permitted.
Okay, no, I'm tracking now.
So this would be permitted, and you look at that additional list of criteria associated with that use. The last item here that we added, it says manufactured home community. And the definition associated with that, I think helps identify, what that is. I thought it was pretty straightforward. When we get there, you guys will let me know if it's not, which is good. We'll flush it out. So that manufactured home community is a parcel of land under single ownership that has been planned and improved for the placement of more than one manufactured home, park model dwelling, or tiny house dwelling for single household dwelling purposes. And then accessory uses include community meeting space, common laundry, recreational facilities, and vehicle parking for residents and staff. So the use table, to focus on that, other thoughts, issues, concerns, or do we need to flop back and forth between definitions and the use table? What works for y'all?
Let's talk a little bit about the use table number 8, dwelling manufactured homes.
Okay,
What that tells me is that manufactured homes could only be allowed in a mobile home park district using the use table. Is that correct?
yes, and that's where those definitions are very key,
Okay, and
because there's a,
Modular homes are allowed elsewhere, so that's different.
well, I thought I saw the word modular under that definition for manufactured. Okay, that's a good point. That's where I was kind of going. Where do modular homes fit under the use table?
a modular means a dwelling unit that is manufactured in a factory and then is assembled into a complete dwelling unit on site, provided that the assembled dwelling unit is installed on an engineered permanent foundation, complies with the building codes adopted by the State Housing Board and the City of Woodland Park Municipal Code Title 15. The term does not include manufactured home, mobile home, park park model dwelling, tiny house, travel trailer, camper, self-contained motorhome, or camper bus.
Or tent.
I read that to say that if your single family detached house is made mostly in a factory and shipped, if it doesn't, still meets all the building codes, it's okay. Doesn't have to be built stick by stick. Isn't that essentially what we're allowing?
Correct, because construction is so different nowadays in so many ways. Whether they're producing panels in a controlled environment or even modules, unit, rooms, that get shipped and assembled on site. That's really referring to, our international residential code, things that are built to that standard.
But I guess I lost the bubble on where you could have such a thing.
In
where you
any of
can't.
your single family zones. Basically where you can have a single household detached.
So there's, for this purpose, there's no meaningful difference between a modular home and a single family detached. I'm not judging here, I'm just trying to understand.
Correct.
Makes me wonder, is dwelling modular a necessary definition? Seeing as
Yeah.
That's
saying
what I
single
wrote.
family detached doesn't say it has to be stick built. It could be,
I think it should be. Where I think I'm on tenuous ground is legally, is the fact that, things that are built to that HUD code, if they perform equivalently to things that are built under the International Residential Code, they are supposed to be allowed in any of those residential zone districts where you would allow that detached single-family home. What does make the difference right now when you look at dwelling, manufactured home is in that particular category, that's what's clearly identified as things built to that HUD code. And then it also includes some of those smaller units, that includes that park model dwelling or a tiny house that meets those definitions in those codes, this code. Those can go where a manufactured home can be placed. Modulars can go where a site-built single-family home can be placed.
I think that's clear.
Okay,
The other comment then, no, that's all I have for now. When we get to the definitions, I got some questions.
So I didn't see the connective tissue on that, if you scroll back up perhaps on the table.
you need her to scroll up on the table towards the top.
Yes. So we have dwelling, single household detached. I don't see where, if you wanted to put a dwelling modular home on a property, I don't see where it's called out anywhere. Where, I can't
it
see where
doesn't say, it
that,
doesn't specify whether it's stick built or modular, factory built.
So maybe,
Doesn't specify one way or another.
so the definition of a dwelling single household
Yeah, detached.
detached should have some reference to modular home.
oh, it does, okay, I think it does, all right, I see it now, okay. So you gotta walk this dog all the way around the block.
So it's the last sentence.
Yeah,
There it is. Yep.
yeah,
Okay,
real
see it now.
quickly. Dwelling, single household detached means a single household dwelling that is not attached to any other dwelling by any means, that contains a primary heat source and living facilities for sleeping, cooking, eating, and sanitation, and that complies with the International Residential Code. This use also includes a modular dwelling that meets that definition in this code.
And
Which is what we knew already, because it didn't say modular, didn't.
Now we define modular and that's good.
But
So,
that's so, it helps feel comfortable that modular is in, it adds a reference to it,
Yes.
okay,
yes,
Okay.
perhaps
yes,
superfluous.
Yes.
so
So, and
site
it
build
will-
is just sort of a common term. It has no definition here.
which one?
Site built.
Which one?
I just heard that, you know,
Dwelling single household detached. Last page.
so we talk about what's manufactured, and so people use the term site built as the opposite of that, but that's not a actually defined term here. So. Oh. You need a whole flow diagram to
Is-
piece this all together.
Before we leave the table and get into definitions, I have one area of concern, and not sure I disagree with you in principle, Karen, but I nevertheless have concerns on dwelling duplex on a single platted lot being P. This was several years ago when we dealt with multifamily. The city council is a limited number of ordinances dealing with it. Multifamily housing, they said, are all conditional. And we're trying to recodify what we're doing here. It's a substantive change in a topic which is related, at least in some vague way, to what's been a area of some concern and public concern and attention. I'm reluctant to move the Cs to P for duplex dwellings, even though I understand your point. I'm not sure it's a good idea to take a multifamily use, a multi-household use, and get rid of the C and make it a P. I'm not saying you couldn't explain it and make a good argument for it, but why should we be explaining and making good arguments for things? We're trying to get the code done without creating issues.
Yeah, no, and I'm not gonna die on that hill. If you guys want the Cs there, you can. I just need to point out how insane this is, that it's a permitted use. A duplex is a permitted use in some of your commercial zones, but not in a multifamily zone district. That is
So
insanity.
when
I'm
I
done.
first got on the planning commission, that was one of my questions is why is a multifamily zone and a multifamily unit not permitted in that multifamily zone? Why is it like that? And they said, well, city council requested that we add this conditional so it would go through a review with the planning commission based on something that happened with an apartment thing or something. There was some history. What's that? It's the tiny home one. Well, anyway, so there was some reason, but I questioned the same thing. Why is this not a permitted use for a duplex to go into multifamily type?
Logic of calling it permitted.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's a sort of thing which just creates an issue for what we're trying to make something.
Just
recodified.
transfer over
I mean,
format.
I mean, when we said the amount of time,
Hmm.
a particular application is good for, whether it's a year or 2 years, and there's some are 1 year, some are 2 year, all right, let's pick one and get it done. I mean, that's one thing. But changing one where the city council explicitly acted on it in a matter related in some manner to a hot zoning topic for the city doesn't seem to me it's the place we want to go.
Tend to
Yeah.
agree.
It's just,
So Jen, make a note that basically where your cursor is, those two Ps need to go back to a C. However, the Ps,
Just for those two, not.
excuse
the-
me, the
not the ones.
Ps under the commercial zones stay. Because
Okay.
that's how it is now.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
one could argue that, but that's sort of the way it is.
Well, no, that's the way it is.
So-
So literally, if I'm questioned in a public hearing, the answer is going to be because that's the way it is now.
No, it's gotta be because this ordinance says so.
No, that's because that's the way it is now.
Exactly, because I don't see our charter as fixing policy choices, especially those that are.
Have been explicitly made by the
One thing,
council.
Commercial zones has been around for decades. The conditional for multifamily has been around for several years and Yeah, I don't want to attribute views to anybody, but somebody's nodding towards me.
Yeah.
I think the answer to your question, how do I explain this? The planning commission discussed this at length.
Yeah.
No, we had nothing to do with it. The city council decided and
No.
published an ordinance.
We're talking about the code here. The code change.
So Larry, for the record, this is why I'm not very bold with this ordinance, just so you know.
No.
We had a conversation last week about being bold and I said, yeah.
Yeah. But I think, I think the majority of us sitting around the table say, we don't want to make too many waves. There are some waves already we're
Yeah.
proposing. They're hidden in there somewhere. But at the same time, if the city council says, that makes sense, why does a multifamily, I use the word family, multi-household district not permit multifamily as a permitted use? And
These are like baby multifamily. These are duplexes, 2 dwelling units on one lot. Just so
Yeah.
it's not
No,
a real
we
multifamily.
all agree that
Multifamily.
that would make sense, but if the city council spoke, they
How long
decided,
is the city council going to discuss? that?
Yeah, and they also
I can see
approved the
this
plan that
generating
said that's a
different
multifamily
views.
zone where we should put apartments and duplexes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well,
why not permit them?
I'd like to finish, and that
Sorry.
is, please tell the city council, that if they feel as strong as we do about that should be changed, but we don't want to change it, they should change it.
I'm not so sure that that's what the city council is told. What the city council be told is there's a new codification of the ordinance. It is substantially the same as what was before. The areas of differences are as follows: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. Those are the differences. I don't want to add number 8 to that list or number, whatever the last one is, to say, oh, and duplexes used to be a conditional use, but now is a permitted use, so you won't get to look at them. I just don't think that helps us anymore in getting, I don't,
No, we'll leave
makes
it.
it a harder job for the city council to pass what they want.
I'd be happy for you to bring it up with the city council though, but let's not change it here.
yeah. that's-
Jen made the note. We're changing them back to conditional use over there in the multifamily zones. They will remain as permitted uses in the commercial zones. I expect to see more of those since you can do an STR in them then. And that's where we go. So
Well, the SCR is a whole different animal.
it is.
I mean, the
But,
people of
you know.
our community decided what an SCR is and where they should go.
Yep. And in a commercial zone. So,
That-
yep,
That's out of our preview altogether.
absolutely.
But I agree with Ken when he says, have that discussion with city council, bring that to their attention and say,
But so I can get lambasted again publicly? Oh, yeah. No,
no.
we'll
council.
see where it goes, Larry. But yeah, it's all right.
It may, if we have a joint work session or two,
Then we'll talk
as
about
we
it.
may, as part of saying things is, right, we had some changed definitions. They work as follows. In other respects, the table's the same, except for such and such. And if there's a, everyone goes, oh my God, then that was a bad idea. People say, well, that makes sense, then we can make the final version happen. But that's about it.
Okay, that's,
Aaron's job isn't to lobby the city council to improve things from a planning standpoint.
no, she can blame us.
All right, well, that,
I will not blame you. I will tell them you gave it a very thorough discussion and this is the direction you had advised.
Yes. And again, that's,
that was,
like you said, that's why we need to have a work session with city council. We have to.
okay.
I got another issue with the use table, but it's kind of a combination between the use table and the definitions.
Okay,
Looking at the use table, tell me where triplexes are allowed.
All right.
they're allowed under single household attached.
Okay,
Sorry, what's the one thing?
Well, because you can have, we have single, we have duplex, and then multi-household jumps to 4. So there's no
Yeah. Yeah.
spot for three.
Well, there is, it's just not overtly spelled out because the distinctions are duplex are two dwellings attached on one piece of ground.
Okay.
Single household attached is two or more that are attached side by side. Each gets a lot underneath it individually, so they can be bought and sold independently. So whether it's a series of duplexes or just one duplex building on what then ends up being two lots, or a triplex, which ends up being three lots, you know, where each unit, even though they're attached, is on its own piece of ground. You could do four, you could do six, single family attached, side by side, where everybody has their own piece of ground under them that's bought and sold separately. It's when you get to the multi-household, that's where you're thinking more in terms of the typical apartment building, because that definition also talks about all of those units on one piece of ground, having access, I think, to a common hallway or the outside. So dwelling multi-household is when you think more like Trail Ridge.
But you can't build a 3-unit apartment building. That's prohibited.
Correct. Well, it doesn't have any legal standing.
Technically correct, yes.
That-
Because how would you do that? A lot of times they look at 3 stories, which runs into height issues, which nobody likes around here. So I'm not looking to
Well,
adjust
I'm
the
not sure
height.
what they could build 2 side by side with a third one above,
Above.
just a third one on the above.
But that's like a
second.
whole other piece of brain damaging in terms of where does that fit,
But
really?
I'm not sure there's
So
enough demand for 3-unit apartment buildings that I'm gonna worry about.
that's the other piece.
Mul-
So,
The multifamily, the apartment buildings today are 4 units or more, so I'm good to go. I'm good with it.
And chances are, if somebody's doing 3, it's probably because it's a townhome that they want to subdivide the land with the dwelling unit so they can be bought and sold separately.
so in general, on these definitions, these just are what they are, and
We can modify them, but I have concerns depending upon where you want to go with
well,
it.
some of the modifications are real simple. It's just, there's like 4 different ways we describe what constitutes basic living requirements for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, blah, blah, blah. I think dwelling unit got it almost pretty darn good, and I would just use that description in all of them. You know, because they're all trying to say the same thing and they're all saying it slightly different. I would just take eating out of the list. I don't know how eating makes it a dwelling unit or not, but
It's in the International Residential Code.
Yeah.
okay.
We can screen that for consistency,
Yeah,
Don,
okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go hard on that.
Specifically calls for heat in a
Well,
building
heat
for
makes,
residential.
heat makes perfect sense.
I'd like to go through the,
Yeah.
Pardon?
I'd like to go through the.
Oh, eating?
Eating.
Oh, it does have that too. Eating area, facility
There's still
for
some general-
cooking.
Aside from,
part of it.
aside from the wording of it, I had some general questions from the definitions.
I'm sorry, Lee, you're really quiet. So what?
Right, dwelling park model and dwelling tiny house. The only place those go are in mobile home parks, correct?
Manufactured home community.
Manufactured home communities, which are only allowed in mobile home parks.
Correct. The mobile home
Yeah.
park zone district.
Okay. And let's talk, if you have a 400 square foot structure,
Uh-huh.
I can make it not a tiny home if I take the plaque off, the metal plaque, which says, because that's one of the requirements, it's only a tiny home if it's got a metal plaque on it saying it meets the rules. And I've got a slightly different definition for park home. Is there some reason we create 2 different categories which have no place to go in the city? Is there, there's no way to come up with a single thought of something up to 800 square feet?
I would recommend using both of those definitions and having them available, because when somebody comes in and says, well, I want to put in a tiny home, it's like, well, does it meet this definition? Well, no, I built it in my backyard using scrap from my uncle. You know, um, it's very helpful. Those definitions also, like I said, I pulled them out of the state code, and the fact that they're also referring to Colorado revised statutes, I think they're things that that state code pulled out of the CRS. So it's very strongly tying things together solidly from that legal perspective. If somebody comes into us and they've got an exceptionally small lot and they're wanting to build, you know, a very small house on that property, we don't have minimum floor area requirements for construction of homes in Woodland Park. So there's nothing that says somebody can't put a 400 square foot house, you know, built from the ground up on a lot in the single family zone
But
district.
how does it create a definition which is restrictive in a sense of, for a tiny house, help address that problem? I gave it a simple example. You take off the metal plaque on it, which says it's a tiny house and court meets the regs. Now it's no longer a tiny house.
And you bolt it to a cement foundation and now it's a regular house.
Yeah, or if its structural strength comes from something other than a structural chassis, and it's not a tiny home.
I don't have an answer for that, Lee. All I know is right now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just thought it would be a good idea to try and address it, but you can say delete the definition, Karen. So just let me know what you want to do.
I just, it just be, I just, because it seems between the two of them, we're saying they go only in mobile home parks or.
Because park
And
models are actually another interesting beast. That's always interesting too, because is it a park model? Is it built like a manufactured home or is it built like an RV? Well, it's a park model. Well, I don't have anything that says you can put it anywhere. So, well, no, but as a park model, you got to let me locate it here.
but
This at
I
least
say-
gives you some tools to at least talk about it.
That comes back to Tamarack Village,
Yeah,
because at the time of this discussion, the Board of Adjustment was asked to appeal the decision of the planning director. The planning director said, these are not tiny homes, they're not manufacturing homes, they are single-family dwellings. And therefore, they're allowed to be in this zone district. So the question before the Board of Adjustment was, did the planning director at that time made the right decision? And based on the information that was presented by staff, by the information that was provided by the neighborhood, the code provisions, the Board of Adjustment made the decision that the decision of the planning commission was right, and they were single family and they weren't dwellings. They weren't tiny homes or manufactured. So leaving the definitions of park model, tiny homes out of here without having a place where they go except for manufacturing, is probably reasonable. I like the idea of having what the state says and what they call them in our code, and then reference that these type of homes belong in a manufactured home community.
Sure. Dave's sharing. You gonna get a microphone and talk? That'd be helpful. Please.
So when this came up a long time ago, this little information sheet came up from Eco Cabins. And so I think this kind of does a good job of explaining the difference between a true tiny home, the park models, a manufactured home, which is more of a HUD type home, and then an IRC modular.
So the, oh, excuse me.
I was gonna say, so with what's currently in front of you, if somebody came in today and says, hey, I want to put multiple single-family homes or, single-family units in single household units on one piece of ground, where people are gonna own that unit, I own the land, I want to set this up. That falls into this manufactured home community. That's where we would plug them in and say, okay, to get that project done, you would need to rezone the property to that mobile home park zone district. And then, as part of that rezoning, right now it's set up as a permitted use in that zone district that you might want to change to a conditional use permit in that zone district. So you can do that additional level of site review like you would for, multifamily houses. But that's where that type of use would go.
Except dwelling multi-household does not prohibit tiny homes, not prohibit park homes.
Dwelling multi-household means one or more buildings or a portion of buildings on a single lot.
The example
Parcel.
Gave a large lot, somebody says you can put your individual unit on it. One or more buildings or portions of building, which I found questionable, portion of a building, I'm not, I was a little concerned about that language. On a single lot, parcel or tract land contains 4 or more individual dwelling units.
Where each unit is occupied.
It seems like it's crying out to have 4. I mean, you could have 1 or 2 buildings that hold the 4, or more buildings, but you could also have 4 single family small houses, however.
Okay, so that's actually a good catch. We can make sure that those units are attached to one another.
All built, I mean, so you don't have one 4-unit building and then 20 or 30 little structures.
Yep, no,
So-
always,
So just for clarity, so when we say dwelling multi-household, that's what the labor, anyone would call an apartment building or apartment complex. Is that the fair statement?
yes. Yes,
And to answer.
That's
the-
what's intended, but I say as written, it says in one or more buildings or portions of buildings.
Does it matter if they're apartments or could they be condos?
condos and ownership structure.
The intent is.
Which
that
means
single-
that yes, they
single
could be
household
either.
attached Is intended to pick up townhouses.
And the definition for manufactured home community intends to provide for manufactured homes, park models, tiny homes.
Right.
So it almost seemed like dwelling multi-household should explicitly exclude the types of housing that are explicitly included in manufactured home community. That way they'd be mutually exclusive and
But it should be defined to be as broadly as possible. I mean, it's sort of a silly example I gave, but tiny home is not a tiny home is not a tiny home unless it's got a metal plaque on it. It says it meets the rules. You take that off, it's not a tiny home. I mean, you want a broad definition. You really mean units under 800 square feet.
to a
And that's,
degree.
I mean, that's not, I'm not saying that's the final definition you use, but I think that's the intent.
Okay, so what's missing from the definition? It's not those other unit types. It's making it very clear in there that these units are attached to one another. So that's the phrase that's missing. Because when you look at
You're talking,
single-
you're in dwelling multi-household right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
when you look at single household attached, it gives a description as to
Yep.
how they're attached, as it does under duplex. So that is actually the piece that's missing from this, is how they're attached.
Exactly.
So we can get that worked in there.
There was a definition of attached that we created so a few years ago in the other I don't know if it's in the new definitions attached or not.
What I'm gonna do to sort that out is I'm going back to the state code to make sure I didn't miss something when I move that over here. And then I'm also gonna look at how we currently are looking at single household attached or duplex. So, because like under single household attached, it says dwellings,
If you
a
get the
household dwelling
common-
attached to one or more by a common vertical wall on one or both sides and where habitable spaces are arranged in a side by side rather than stacked configuration. So we can put in here language that talks about how they're connected to one another. So you've got 4 or more units or wherever that,
Sharing a common wall.
yes, we'll get that sorted out.
Or common floor ceiling or
Well,
there's various.
we'll make it clear that it's multiple units that are physically connected to one another. And I don't mean by a gutter.
And
Yeah, or a carport or,
Yeah,
yeah, so the,
breezeway.
well, between the duplex and the attached, we made the distinction of whether they could be, whether the parcels were individually owned or whether it was on one parcel.
Correct.
Is that a meaningful distinction in this discussion? Seems to me that the multi-household, AKA apartment building, would tend to be under a single ownership. But then again, then the word condominium comes up and that gets very blurry again. So I think it's a meaningful distinction, but I don't know where to draw the line, to be perfectly honest.
We will work on that.
Yeah.
We will.
I was just gonna say, not disagreeing what was said earlier, but as messy as it is, if we define tiny home, we define modular and
Or model.
manufactured and model and park and all that. That way, when someone is interested in that type of home and they go to this code, they should find themselves very quickly and go, okay, I'm good here, I'm not good there. Versus trying to say, well, what the heck am I? Because I think I might fit 3 of these definitions and I don't know which one applies. So I think it does add value in that regard because I think most people building, buying, locating residents would be able to self-identify in one of those categories, and then this would tell them where they fit in terms of zoning, et cetera. Despite the fact that, to Lee's point, that the definitions get overly prescriptive and, can lead to their own confusion.
Yeah, in that regard, if it's possible to make them less prescriptive, it would be useful, because the intent, I think, is to make them broader, not narrower.
Right.
Not necessarily. I'm actually putting up parameters and limitations here, and now you're pushing back.
Yeah.
Earlier, when I had no limitations, you were like, we need boundaries.
Well,
So
they need
just-
just enough and the right boundaries to be distinguishable, clear, that whatever you come up with will clearly fit in one category and not the others. That's very much easier said
The
than done.
major
I get that.
distinction is one 1 to 400 and the other's 400 to 800. That's the one that you can really get a handle on.
That one's pretty distinguishing. Yeah.
And the difference is, doesn't matter either way. They're gonna treat them the same.
Well, yeah, they all get thrown in the same bucket in the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And when all else fails, go back to the state.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Can we change the subject for a little bit?
By the way, are we approaching being done, or do people need a break? It's been more than 2 hours. Are we good to go for another 15, 20 minutes, finish us up here?
If that's how long you think you need. I know we probably do need to go through the definitions a little more methodically.
Oh, yeah, that's so. All right, does anyone need a break? Oh, okay. Larry.
Larry,
We've discussed everything I had written down for the definitions. I did ask, do we think about accessory dwelling units? Not as part of the use table, but as the definition. And I draw the collective memory of the people that were on the commission when we had our discussion with Woodland Station. And we were talking about dwelling units allowed. And we were talking about dwelling units would be allowed if they had a store on the bottom floor and a dwelling unit on top. Kind of a shop, office, live type of unit. Do we need to address that in our accessory dwelling unit definition?
Not in there. No, I would not do it. I would not do it as part of the ADU definition. It potentially needs some work under, well, a different term. And then standards related to like that Woodland Station overlay zone. Cause there's, and ironically, the Woodland Station overlay zone actually does specify the dwelling units above commercial space. And that was one of the things they were actually asking to change at one point. We actually processed a code change around that didn't gain traction, or they withdrew it. I can't remember what happened. So there's a different way to get to that, but I would not do it through an ADU.
Okay.
Cause Jen's got it pulled up on the screen, that accessory dwelling unit definition, everything in black is existing language. And what I suggested changing there was getting rid of the word family and going to single household detached. So that's the only change within that ADU definition. Otherwise, it's all existing language.
Oh, by the way, they're both in the use table and the accessory dwelling unit ones, single household has now become a hyphenated term. Usually hyphenated, but it was not in every place.
Okay, so that's a grammar check.
That is in the ADU and in the use table.
Okay. So the next definition is that clustered residential development. Again, everything in black is our current language. And from a prior conversation, you all had asked for that insertion of the word residential. So just showing you that that's still clearly in there. So as we go down the words in blue, that's what we were pulling from, whether it's the state or some modification to fit Woodland Park. Any issues or concerns with the definition dwelling unit other than and I recognize, Don, I heard you earlier about how dwelling unit is explained, that language is, you thought was best there to be consistent about how that appears in subsequent definitions. Are there concerns about dwelling unit? Okay. The next one was dwelling duplex. So that's that single building with two attached independent dwelling units under one roof on one piece of land. Issues, concerns? Okay. The next one, and it sounds out of order, but it's not when you look at the terminology we're going to. As I showed you, our current definition of manufactured HUD home, and so it fits in with all the other dwellings. It would be dwelling, comma, manufactured home. And this is what I pulled out of the state code. So it's very much similar to what we already had. It's got a few other parameters around it that talk more specifically about withstanding our local, our wind and snow loads, those kind of things. And then it includes that additional language that within that term, park model dwelling or a tiny house dwelling that meets the definitions in this code are considered manufactured homes. And then it also specifies what it does not include. So travel trailers, campers, self-contained motorhomes, or camper buses.
Do we have definitions of all those?
No, some of those get into common sense. And that they, ironically, the state didn't have definitions of those either. So. The definition for mobile home is as it currently appears in our code. The only change is the addition of the word dwelling in front of that. The next one is our current definition of modular factory-built residential structure. And that really is that dwelling comma modular. And if you read through and compare those, there's a lot of language from that current definition that does now appear in that dwelling modular. That was one of the more challenging ones to incorporate that in. So it really reflects what we currently refer to it as well as, expand it out there at the end that it's not travel trailers, camper trailers, those kind of things. The next one was that dwelling multi-household. That's where we identified that we need to make clear that these are units that are attached to one another. So we will get that sorted out and included.
That also needs to be addressed in dwelling single household attached.
That one it is attached, that one it is specified.
Okay,
So for comparison, let's switch down there. So dwelling single household attached means a single household dwelling attached to one or more single household dwellings by common vertical wall on one or both sides, and where habitable spaces of different units are arranged in a side-by-side rather than stacked configuration, each with direct entrance to the outdoors, where each unit contains a primary heat source, living facilities. That's Don's language that he wants cleaned up. And each located on its own lot. So that one's, I thought, a little more clear. So Larry's nodding yes, okay. So back to the dwelling multi-household, how they're attached needs to be clarified. Interestingly, the state actually starts dwelling multi-household at 5 units.
Well, we're more liberal than they are.
Well, I just think in terms of how ease of construction or assembling things, that it's very common to have 2 downstairs, 2 upstairs, that share a hallway.
Yeah, and there's some square 4-unit, a whole street of them. I can't remember the name of the street. Not just parallel to 67. They're all 4 ABCD units.
Yeah. So the next definition is dwelling comma park model. So this is one of those that comes from the state, the model code, and references back to state statute, I believe. Concerns? Dwelling, single household detached. That's your old school single family residential home. And it does, of course, take into account, things that are built according to the International Residential Code. So it also includes modular dwellings that are built to that code standard.
So is there a meaningful distinction between the International Residential Code and the State Housing Board and City of Woodland Park municipal codes, or do we just adopt the same? Or is it just a circular reference?
There's probably some subtle differences between those. Exactly what they are, I can't elaborate on. The International Residential Code is the building code that most communities operate under for building things from scratch. I'm not sure what the state code looks like, how much that's the same or different, what standards are specified in that. The City of Woodland Park Code is essentially that International Residential Code. And that's spelled out in Title 15. It makes reference to the Pikes Peak Regional Building Code, which then makes reference to the International Residential Code. So that one's a
That's
little circular,
kinda
but
what
at
I
the
figured.
bottom of it, it's the IRC or the International Building Code.
But for all intents and purposes for our zoning and permitted conditional uses, dwelling modular and dwelling single house detached are the same thing.
Correct.
Okay.
The next definition is that dwelling / tiny house.
Wait a minute,
Oh, sorry.
on detached, I just wanted to say I'm very glad that last sentence is included in that definition. The use includes modular dwellings that meet the definition of this code.
Okay.
That's a good thing to have there.
So then the next one was that dwelling, tiny house. I said that's pulled from the state. I did not massage that one bit. I just wouldn't know what thread to pull. So. All right, this next definition, that's where we talked about very early on this evening, that the state legislature made some changes this last year that you can no longer regulate, occupancy or number of occupants of a household based on familial relationships. So that recommendation is to still list in our code that word family, but then see definition of household. So that's where you get into that next definition of what household is. And I said, again, I pulled that from the state model code.
Is that because you're afraid family is hanging around in various places in the code that you're not sure of, or why is it still there?
Well, we can delete it in its entirety.
I'm saying if it's not used anywhere, family,
Shouldn't. Yeah.
Then we just need to scan the code and make sure we remove family.
Okay,
Yeah, and then you just have to rename MFS and MFU.
right?
Yep. It's gonna take a lot for me to remember that SFRs don't exist anymore. Single family residential.
SH.
I will probably sputter incorrectly for a very long time, Larry, so I appreciate what you're saying about making that switch. When Jen and I have talked about this, we
We don't have a single family residential zone.
Is that, well, no, we don't.
Right.
Suburban residential. You
Yep,
already got it out of there.
yep.
so,
So Lee, going back to your metal plate, the way I read it, if it doesn't have the metal plate, it's a shed. So it's that metal plate that makes it a legal household to live in. So,
as a tiny home.
so I think that, yeah, so I think they'll want to keep the metal plate on there.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Keep your plate on your
We
unit.
need to, we'll have a little more time. We should think about this, how best to do this. Dwelling, single family detached includes modular dwelling, but does not include park models, tiny home. I don't, just thinking out loud.
Yeah, well, you just have to walk the dog because single household attached includes modular. Modular explicitly does
Something-
not include manufactured mobile home, park dwelling, et cetera.
So,
So,
because I'm concerned about the definitions of park homes and tiny houses, I'm not sure that's quite right, but since dwelling single family, you felt you want to note that it includes modular dwelling, even though that's maybe not necessary. Might add it does not, it expressly excludes park model homes and tiny houses. And that's certainly the intent.
Yes, that's a good point.
Think about it. See what Jen's reaction to, and just.
okay, household living.
Yep, sorry, I'm getting there. So that's where we were. Well, household, I don't know unless you had any other comments or concerns about how household is defined.
Where did you said, did the definition come from the
The
legal?
state.
Yeah, good.
So then the next one is, what is household living?
Where do we use that in the code?
I don't know that we use it, but it was associated with these other ones I was pulling from the state.
Might have something to do with short-term rentals.
Possibly. I do think I find it helpful in terms of making that distinction. In terms of what's lodging versus living, and I mean that interim lodging versus longer term household living. So even though the term is not in the code, it's also a term that you're not likely to find in Webster's or Merriam's dictionary. So I do think it has value to put in there, even though it's not necessarily appearing somewhere.
I understand it'd be helpful.
Because I'm not gonna you can't find that term in a dictionary, Lee.
Yeah, but if it's not used anywhere either, there's a lot of words that can't.
But it goes to, framing that argument or discussion. If we'd had this previously, it might have been helpful around dealing with short-term rentals.
Yeah, if
If it were referenced.
If
eight
it said
years ago.
somewhere that household living is what goes on in our the designated residential districts. That would be another way of getting there, but.
Well, I think one of the key phrases here is tenancy is arranged on a month-to-month or longer basis.
No, it's a good and useful definition. It's just interesting that it doesn't appear to actually be used anywhere. And maybe that's what ought to be considered. There might be places in the other place in the code where this would be a very useful definition.
Well,
Useful definition or useful term,
We're not gonna be drafting the STR rules, so
we're leaving those.
exactly, we're not.
Well,
that sign.
we serve at the city council's pleasure.
This is one of those where I'm comfortable leaving, but if you guys are telling me we don't want this in the code, we'll take it out. Just tell me which way you want to go.
Is it coming from the state?
Yes.
Well, the only words I'm really concerned about is this. Household living means a land use category.
Residential is a land use category too, but we don't necessarily talk about residential that broadly it's
I know. Keep it,
commercial is a broad category.
keep it.
Okay.
Haven't heard anything.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, home stretch, manufactured home community. We talked about that previously. And then the last one is mobile home park. And that one is currently in our rules. And I did do I recommended some strikeouts in there just to kind of clean that up a little bit. So bottom line question is if you're comfortable.
We don't have a definition, we don't have a land use over in our table called a mobile home park anymore.
MHP.
Yep.
That's a zone district designation.
Is there anything in it? Is there anything?
The last sentence that you struck was pretty, it helped clearly identify some discussions we were having earlier with
Yep.
slightly different terminology. With slightly different wording. But it's like saying
It's a zone.
park homes and tiny homes go only in mobile MHP zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
It's another way of, it's like I said, the intent is all there. The end result is there. It's just cleaned up in terms of how you get
Yeah,
there.
that's the first place we said it directly and it struck out.
I'm sorry,
I was saying, all right, so you suggested excluding them from single family detached. But there's value in just saying what we mean. Park homes and tiny homes only go in MHP zones. Makes it easier to explain what they're for.
Yeah. Right now, we have 2 mobile home parks in town, right?
No.
No.
No? 3?
Technically, no. they're
Non-conform, as a
Oh, that's
non-conforming use.
Okay, well, maybe we should,
Non-conforming.
That's right.
So maybe we should be looking at maybe a manufactured home community zoning district instead of a mobile home park district. If we don't have mobile.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. next
Well, we have a, we
or the year after.
legally, Larry,
Won't be here.
legally, we have the structure, just no one has legally gone to the process of creating a properly zoned mobile home park. So it's not nothing on us. Structure's there.
Larry, we can rename that zone district. Instead of it being mobile home park.
Yeah,
I don't know, I'll look at it, whether it's manufactured home
community park.
or I don't know, I gotta go look at what other folks have done with that.
Okay,
And it may still stay the same, it's what goes into that district. It's one of those terms where people understand what a mobile home park is.
mhm.
So it might not be worth messing with. The zone district, the intent is you've got multiple small units, people own the unit, the land is shared, you rent your space, you know, it's fairly dense. These are the standard, I mean, we've got standards associated with what this looks like. So,
So while we're speaking in plain English, why don't we call them apartments and townhomes? 'Cause those are pretty well understood terms.
Yeah.
because I had some.
Or they're going.
Huh?
You know,
Because the problem is, and I had a different planner on staff for a short while, where the fact that we had, the way we have it structured now was problematic. That the duplexes, she's like, why is this not single family attached? You know, it was really throwing her off from having worked at other places, to talk about, I think it was the homes at Brecken Heights and what added, it was actually kind of a problem. I mean, if you want to go back to other terminology, we can, if the definitions are clear, that's helpful. Because right now, I mean, we put forth a good effort, okay? If you guys don't like
It
it,
is though. I
be
like
more
I like what you're
specific.
trying to do here. I really do.
So let me know.
Yeah,
Nobody's pushing back going, oh no, you gotta rename this. I mean,
no, I just,
unless that conversation's turning on me.
these are the terms the state uses. Correct question?
Yes, that's
All
where
right.
I got them.
All right.
I didn't sit up one night,
No, I know.
with the bottle of wine, trying to come up with a way to confuse you, I promise.
Was there sympathy for my suggestion that we expressly exclude tiny and park home models from single family detached? They are single family detached, but they're not in our single family detached.
I thought that made sense because you have to like follow the trail on, but the trail's not completely clear that since it includes modular and modular explicitly excludes that, does that mean it's excluded in the parent? You know, it'd be much cleaner and clearer if it just stated, had that same sentence that we have under modular.
And it's very similar to the language already struck for mobile home park or whatever we choose to call it.
So Lee, for whatever it's worth, I've made a note of that, looking
Yeah.
for clarity on that. Under dwelling single household detached to clarify how park model versus tiny homes fit relative to that.
No,
The
but I
best way
think,
to do that, I'm not 100% sure whether we want to refer people back to, or just the note that park model and tiny homes are considered types of manufactured homes, see manufactured home definition. Or I don't know how I want to solve it, but I did make note that you would like it addressed.
I will second Lee's motion. I like the idea of having a separate sentence saying this definition excludes tiny homes, park homes.
Okay,
yeah, and I guess with mobile home park, once again, whatever the state's using these days for that, use that.
Mobile home park, mobile home community,
Whatever.
manufactured home.
I don't care if they call it Bob, just.
Let's think about this for a moment. In our existing mobile home parks, Excuse me. I was going to suggest that in our existing mobile home parks that we have in our community that's, we'll say, don't
Yeah.
exist. Somebody wants to bring in a unit that's built after 1976, that would not be allowed because it doesn't fit the definition for a mobile home.
That's the way it reads.
I know.
I'm sorry, please say that again. What?
Our
Where are you?
Definitions.
definition of a mobile home park, you know, if somebody wanted to move a mobile home that was built after the definition of a mobile home, which was built before June
It's on
15th,
the other section,
1976,
table,
they wouldn't be
sorry.
allowed to do that.
It's in the
Yes,
table.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
You
so.
struck that homes and
So-
pre-1976.
Yeah, mobile homes that were built prior to that HUD code going into effect in 1976.
mhm,
It is correct that the ones that are there now can stay, but if there's an opening in one of these places and somebody wants to move in a unit from 1968, they cannot do it.
Yeah.
Because those are typically not built to any code.
okay.
So there's a life safety reason for having that distinction of when a unit is moved in, that it at least meets one of these codes.
We'll go back to the definition of dwelling, a mobile home. Means a manufactured home built prior to the implementation of the HUD code before June 15th, 1976.
Yes.
So that's what a mobile home means. It was built before 76.
Yep.
And then you look at mobile home park. Well, I guess it doesn't really specify anymore, does it? Well, it does.
Yes,
Habitation
of
of
mobile
mobile homes.
and or manufactured,
And manufactured homes.
Yeah.
so it can contain either.
And there is a dwelling manufactured home definition, so that'd be what goes in there.
So any new mobile home park in the city is gonna have really old stuff.
Oh, it can have
No, it can have
dwelling manufactured home.
homes.
There won't be one.
I just had one question, I guess. So you got the definitions from the state that say tiny home, travel trailer, camper self-contained motorhome, and or camper bus. So recreational vehicle is considered self-contained motorhome. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, because we have recreational vehicle used elsewhere, so maybe we should just make those all the same. Either way, I don't care which way, just so that they're all the same.
We can look for consistency on that. Absolutely. Okay.
Waited till the end. Waited till late.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on was condominium and townhome plats, which is where that started in terms of we got to go back and look at all these definitions and categories. Because the way our code is currently written, that a final plat for a townhome development, well, and actually, let me back up a little bit. There's the actual platting of the land that goes through a traditional subdivision process, depending upon the scale, whether it's a minor or major subdivision. May include the sketch plan stage, preliminary plat, final plat. The plat gets recorded. You've got a piece of ground that can then be further developed. So that piece of ground, there are instances where somebody comes in and says, I want to do my townhome development, or single household attached. That the way the code is currently set up, that plat for those dwelling units, the townhome dwelling units, can be processed administratively. It does not go back through a public hearing process. So you guys have previously questioned, well, but these things require conditional use permits. When does that happen? So that was part of the question we were trying to answer. I went back and looked at Brecken Heights. They, prior to the code change, I believe, we got their site plan for the townhomes was looked at as part of the preliminary plat for the land division. So that's when that was looked at. The land was platted, so into the big parcel where all those units are going. And then the townhome plat was done administratively. But if you get a new project, where does this go? So I think the answer is going to be, it depends a little bit on whether or not that piece of land is already got a plat to it. That if it's already platted, you're going through at that point, the conditional use permit process for the multifamily housing. And then when that conditional use permit is approved, then from there, you could do that final plat administratively. If it's earlier in that whole subdivision process where the land's not been, it's still got a meets and bounds description to it, so we're still splitting up like 4 parcels, and this is the one for townhomes. The developer has that option of having that conditional use permit reviewed concurrently with one of those other phases that is subject to public hearing, or they can come back at a later point for that conditional use permit for whichever piece they're wanting to develop with multiple dwelling units. So that's how I see that shaking out. And just a little bit of language that kind of helps direct traffic there a little bit. It's probably not going to be that clean. It may be, we'll give it our best shot to make it as clear as possible. But there's already language that we've put together that allows for concurrent processing of applications. So that's already in there in a prior section. Or whatever that's worth. So that's where that's at in terms of trying to get that pulled together.
Sounds reasonable.
So. And that's all I had this evening. Jen, did you have anything else?
No, I did not.
Starting to make me worry. It's like, did my phone go dead?
No, I was trying to unmute on Zoom before I realized I was on the phone.
I think you didn't unmute both.
Oh,
I think we're all good.
okay.
Thank you, Jen.
All right. So our next meeting, April 10th, I believe it is, will be another work session. We should have hopefully the last chunk of all this, the loose ends that we need you to look at before everything gets recompiled into a clean version of the code. We've talked previously about next steps. Larry was asking me for a definitive kind of checklist about those next steps. I did not have a chance to really pull that together for this particular meeting this evening, but I'll do my best to get that pulled together for your next meeting, so you can kind of see our remaining steps. But we're pretty close to having something that needs to go out to legal review. For the sake of timing and efficiency, probably going to have some concurrent reviews happening amongst different groups, you folks included. So that's
Just a minute, I mean, we're not that close to legal review. I mean, we had this discussion before. We wanted to see a full draft and have a chance to discuss it. So just discuss what's in it and then send it to legal, not send it to legal review while we're working over the draft, the final draft. It may add a few weeks to the process, but I think we don't want to have to go to legal twice, and that was the approach we discussed previously, I believe. But
Yes.
Well, but did you say legal before we review it or after?
no, legal after we review it,
Yeah.
so,
We don't want to have legal modify it twice.
exactly. Right. I think we will need a few weeks with the final draft to look at.
okay.
And I know this sounds really stretching it, but I know we've been working on this for a long time. But if we can get this done, we'll try to timeline this thing to get done before November 1st.
Larry, can you talk to the microphone, please, sir?
I strongly like to see if we can get a timeline that we can get this project finished by November 1st. The reason I'm saying November 1st, because we get into the November and December holidays, and those times are really difficult to get things done. I think that's a worthy goal if we can shoot for that, Karen. I know that's a pressure on you, but we need to behave ourselves as commissioners too, saying, we've already reviewed that, we've discussed it, we've agreed on this, and this looks like what we thought about. I know there's people on the commission that were involved with those earlier discussions, but trust us. Yeah, well. So I just want you to think about that. And as we talk about a timeline, if we could.
Basically-
You weren't thinking November anyways. You were thinking long before November, I
Oh,
think.
yeah. So the other part of this
Yeah.
is, it's gonna boil down to, nobody's gonna have enough time. Nobody, staff included, you guys, legal, nobody's gonna have the time that they want. So basically, when this gets launched, you gotta step on it. So, I mean, I can get you your window, but it's not gonna be big. Be reasonable, but not big.
Well, yeah, I said, I think we'd like to see the document for a few weeks before I'd ask people to say, vote, is this what you want to recommend to the city council? I'm not gonna get it on Friday and the next Thursday night, you're ready to go.
Thursday after that, but yes.
Yeah. How many rough pages we talking? I've never like printed out the code.
You saw the notebook, original development code notebook?
I don't know that I don't remember. I don't know where we are on pages.
Yeah.
If we shorten the language to just director and not director or designee, that potentially helps.
Global search and replace, done.
You know, it all adds up.
It does. It does.
And
All right.
in the definition for cities, it means parents.
Thank you for indulging my snarky sense of humor.
Always.
No, you guys are awesome. I appreciate all of your comments. It's interesting when we go through this, the amount of group think and reflection. I'm sure you've noticed that you guys often snap on the same thing and in mostly the same direction. So hopefully that builds some degree of confidence in terms of what we've been going through. And then for those folks that are new to this, when you see something, it's like, okay, this is probably something that they've discussed already. This is in theory, it should be the direction you gave us. That, yeah, we're not going out rogue on our own. We're very much honoring the guidance you all have been providing and getting that restructured and pulled together. So and then the other wild card for me is depending upon how many other current development applications come through the door, because those guys, they come first, you know, they're not going to want to sit around for a month while we work on something else. Time is money, development, that's their livelihood. So.
You know, as we
Okay.
look at the next draft, and it seems to be overwhelming for us to review that 5 days or 2 weeks.
You
Maybe,
get more than 5 days, Larry.
maybe what we need to think about is a day that starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and includes lunch and gets us to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And as much as that.
You're as much as saying what the final draft is gonna take 2 final drafts.
Well, we're gonna have to review the next draft. Which would include things we've talked about before. But I know Don's gonna have questions about why did you decide that or make those decisions?
I don't wanna be the down that much.
But he should have that opportunity to say, what were you thinking?
Going through the entire document is a big hurdle. It's not one evening.
No, we recognize it takes time to get through
Mm.
all of it, and especially when you're comparing, contrasting and referencing sections and and those kind of things. I recognize that you've got to think through it in a couple different ways when you're looking at it. So I know that's part of what happens. You know, at a certain point, we need to call it and move forward. And so it doesn't matter what we set up. It's not going to be sufficient is basically what I'm hearing is, well, we should look at it. Legal should look at it. Then, well, we might have something else because if something comes up from legal, well, then we need to look at another draft. And it's like, no. I mean, I don't know exactly what that looks like. I will make sure you have opportunity to get in there and review and comment, probably through Conveo. Because that does seem to be a very good tool to help us focus where our comments are. And Jen and I will review your comments, and if they're typo kind of things, that's very different than if it's something of substance.
I haven't noticed, but in Conveo are the hyperlinks that we're going to have to other sections going to be active where we can click and follow to check all references and things like that? Or could we go ahead and get a draft of it in the web form, the way it's going to be on the website, to use that? Because then we could click through links. When it says referencing a code, we can just click on it, open it up, look at it, go on to the next section. I don't know that we all need to do that, but that would be helpful if we wanted to check the references and stuff in the code. You just prepare it like it's going to be published.
Jen, can you answer that?
Yeah, I can. Let me put my thoughts into place here. We can provide the hyperlinks in the PDF that goes on Conveo. It won't be in the exact same format as you'll see it on Unicode, because Unicode takes it and kind of puts it into its own format, but it will be very similar.
We don't want to make you do that twice.
Well, and that's the thing. Unicode will do the references for us, so we don't have to get them all cross-referenced to get the references completed in Unicode. But if you guys wanted to see that, we could do it in the PDF version.
I would find it very helpful to have Word or an editable PDF version compared to Conveo. I find Conveo myself hard to use. An editable PDF or a Word document would be much easier for me personally. I don't know how other people find it. It's just the box in the box and scrolling through it.
It's a cumbersome tool, actually. I mean, it does collect it for Jen nicely. So it goes right to Jen. That's a good thing about Conveo, but it is difficult you just go back and look at what you typed, and
the way you type.
kind of limited.
The way you
And,
type,
and as soon as you put something on it, you can't see it again. You've covered it up,
Yeah,
part of your document. I find that.
But if, Jen, you mentioned if a PDF version is available, that I would find that much more helpful in being able to timely review the document.
Yeah, when we get to the entire code, that might be the best.
I'm also thinking too, I don't want to see add-ons or strikeouts. I want to see what that code looks like at this particular point.
Yeah, you're getting a clean copy. We're not going through the,
Red
Yeah.
lines.
No. Then you see the whole picture and how that all fits together.
Yeah, and I can look into some options for PDF. I know there's a way that we can share a PDF through Adobe on our end that is I don't want to say editable, but it might be a little bit easier to navigate. It's compiling the comments at our end, like somebody mentioned, that is much more complicated in that version.
So tools like SharePoint and Google Docs, I mean, we can all literally go into the same document.
I mean,
we can all
Adobe
put a
does the
comment,
same thing
and then
for
we can
commenting
actually
and
see
reviewing
it.
documents.
She doesn't have to like consolidate, 9 versions, so that's great. But we can actually see each other's comments and right there in
I haven't
line.
used Google Docs, but I believe you.
But it's
I have.
Karen's having a bad flashback, I think.
well, no, part of the problem is you get into open meetings issues and concerns. And if you're sharing a document, is that a conversation? Is that a meeting? So that's where that's a little more problematic and where Conveo was helpful is that you're not conversing or sharing what's going on. We'll sort through that. If you have other requests, send them to me in an email. We'll sort through them. Well, I'm sure somebody's going to be disappointed. But I'll do our best to get you what you're all asking for.
I think, Karen, you gotta, somebody like me, I just figured out how to use Word. You know, using other formats and platforms will be difficult. I'm sorry. I'm old.
All right, well, we can continue that conversation as we get closer to that final draft, right? You still have
Yeah.
work sessions to do.
I'll figure out what it's gonna look like. And like I said, somebody's gonna be disappointed. I'm just not sure who. It might be me. So it's okay.
Yeah, the goal is to disappoint everybody equally.
I'm fairly adept at that.
Yeah, your job lends itself to that. You
Oh.
can't make everybody happy and probably can't make anybody happy.
Well, that's where I've joked a couple times. Let's just start with the assumption that you're going to be disappointed or you know, with me, you know, if we just know that I'm going to fall short, if we just start right there and then drive on, things will go much easier.
Yeah, we'll set some ground rules, you know, ideally. Only comments that substantively change the meaning, you know, like I think, hey, there's a disconnect here, or, you know. Shouldn't be any more happy, shouldn't be any happy glads at this point.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Hey Karen, did you say that was it